For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description. Chapter 21, Abraham Van Helsing 2. More than that. Ludger interrupted Hans when he was about to say his real name. Now my name is Ludger. Call me Ludger Chelsea. Ludger Chelsea, you said? Ah, come to think of it, you also used that name when you sent me the letter. What on earth happened? Why didn't you meet me in the capital city where we were supposed to meet? It's a long explanation. More than that. Ludger shook his head as he glanced at Hans. You're still causing accidents no matter how much time has passed, huh? What kind of appearance is that this time? Damn it. Who do you think would want to be like this? Hans's current appearance resembled a werewolf that could make anyone who was walking on the street scream and run away. However, that was because the surroundings were dark. But if people had seen this appearance in bright daylight, they would have felt rather odd instead of running away. Hans's appearance had no ferocity peculiar to a werewolf at all. To be exact, he even had a cuteness that did not match his size. What did you get bitten by this time? I don't know. It was some kind of a furry brown puppy. Who would have thought that he would bite me after suddenly jumping down from an old lady's arms? I can tell roughly what kind of dog breed it is from that appearance. Hans, who had the shape of a half-human and half-beast, had brown fur on him. However, the brown fur was not a dark and dull of a wolf that had been traveling throughout the wild, but rather it was more of a noticeable brighter brown. Above all, the shape of his face was very different from that of a wolf. He had a shorter muzzle than a wolf's long head and bigger eyes. Right, he looked just like a Pomeranian that was famous for its cuteness as a pet. The furry puppy that Hans said had bit him was a Pomeranian. I've been feeling this way for a long time, but you have a very interesting body type. Damn it. Don't make fun of someone else's hardship. I wonder if I've actually been cursed. Hans was a human being who was born with a rather unusual body type. When an animal bit him, that animal's genes were expressed into his body, and he was mutated into their shape. The legendary werewolf, whose human skin was suddenly torn and their wildness exploded when they saw the full moon. That was Hans. However, should I say that it's a flaw that he is different from ordinary werewolves? Werewolf meant transforming only into a wolf, just like the name suggested, and it only reacted when the full moon rose, but Hans was not like that. Hans was still intact even when he saw the full moon, but only when he was bitten by an animal did he forcibly mutate, and he would transform into the animal that bit him. If he got bitten by a wolf, then he would be a werewolf. If he got bitten by a tiger, then he would be a were-tiger. If he got bitten by a bear, then he would be a were-bear. Hans, who could mutate through Thayway, had quite enormous power. The problem was that he was born in the wrong generation. Where are the wolves, tigers, and bears in the cities in this current age where civilization and science have developed? They were the men who had to go somewhere in the deep and perilous mountains to discover those animals. And the precondition that they could only change when they got bitten was ridiculous. If they got bitten by a wild predator beast, they would die with one bite, let alone being able to transform. So how come they could only transform when they're bitten? If they didn't want to die, it was better to give up the idea of mutating to something wilder. As a result, Hans could only mutate himself into animals in the city that could easily be encountered, whether they were wandering street cats, wild dogs, or pets raised by noble ladies. It seemed that his unusual body type might have had some kind of effect, as the problems when the animals were rushing to Hans overlapped with each other. It didn't matter if something like an animal's fur only touched his skin. As soon as the animals bit him because they were being attracted, that cursed ability was awakened. There was no such thing as letting him mutate by his own will. There was also no proper way for him to control the ability. If Hans lowered his guard for even a little bit, he would be bitten by a small animal and forced into mutating into the form of a half-human and half-beast. Just like his appearance in front of Ludger at that moment. A strange power that's different from magic. What Hans had was actually more of a superpower. Take this. Ludger took an ampoule jab containing a green chemical from his pocket and threw it to Hans. Hans hurriedly grabbed the ampoule with both hands and injected it right into his forearm with a happy face. Shoot. Then a change occurred immediately. The fur that had grown thick on his body thinned, and his big size gradually decreased. The bright, cute Pomeranian face had also changed to a slightly mean-looking man. Returned to his original state, Hands touched his body here and there and breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, if it weren't for you, I'd have been going through a lot of suffering for a few more days. It's right now that I think about it. It was quite a long time ago that Ludger had met Hands. At that time, Hands was being chased here and there, being called a monster because he couldn't control his own body. Still, if he had the power to turn into a beast, he could pretend to be a king in the back alley, but he was a man who couldn't fight, so he just wandered from place to place to avoid persecution. It was a once-in-a-lifetime fortune for Hands to meet Ludger at that time. I almost died when I first met you. You did. I thought you were a cryptid that was roaming around the city. A cryptid was a mysterious creature that appeared implicitly throughout the city now that the monsters had disappeared. They were some kind of monster remnants. Compared to monsters in reality, they were a little more like a supernatural phenomenon. Magical beasts, spirit beasts, and the other strange beasts, or also beings who reacted to negative emotions and magic power that embodied them. That was a cryptid. Ludger had also met Hands because he was asked to eradicate cryptids. But when he had first met Hands, Ludger was quite taken aback when he realized that he was not the werewolf he had imagined. That was because Hands at that time was a half-human and half-beast that had a similar shape to a chihuahua. He was a so-called were-chihuahua. I was quite surprised to find out later that you were a human being with a decent ability to talk. Was that a surprise? I was rather surprised by your ability to develop the cure to it in such a short time. It is not a cure, it's more like a neutralizer. Well, that's that. Hands snorted. If it weren't for this medicine that you made for me in the first place, I might have been hunted as a monster somewhere in the back alley. Ludger nodded as he didn't deny such a statement. But this time, you said your alias was Ludger Chelsea. And a professor at Surin Academy. When the hell did you create that identity called Ludger Chelsea? It sounds a little chaotic. How surprised I was to hear that you suddenly became Surin's professor in the letter. It's a little long to explain the situation. Ludger explained how he became a teacher of Surin, starting with the terrorist attacks on the magic engineering train. When Hands heard his last sentences, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. Kekek. Ha 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 ha. You're really amazing, too. How could you say that you're Ludger right there? I had to do it if I wanted to live. If it were me, I would have stuttered and acted extremely suspicious. Even worse, Ludger was originally a member of an unidentified secret society. He's also an executive called the First Order. First Order, huh? Do you know anything about it? Hands was immersed in contemplation as he stroked his chin. It was his habit when he tried to think of something. Well, I think I've heard of it. No, it's surely within my memory. Have you heard of the recent turmoil in the Empire's underworld? No, not yet. Well, it's quite recent, so you might not know. They say there are a lot of new guys out there, but they're all pretty strong and crazy. Oh well, those guys call each other as members or whatever and classify each of them with what order. I think it's certainly them. What's the name of the society? They're called the Black Dawn Group. Some people call them the Black Dawn Society. The Black Dawn Group, or the Black Dawn Society. Ludger mused on the name. The guys involved with him were definitely not normal, nor were they average. They had planted many of their members in Surin, assassinated the employees, hid their identity, and even did an infiltration. They must have been extremely vigilant people. You have any more information about them? It's very recent, so I don't know the details. What I know is just the name of the organization and its rank. But did you just become their First Order recently? It's not that I became the First Order. It's a situation where I have to wear the mask of the original First Order. Right now, you're lucky that they passed it with that face, but if you make a mistake, won't you get caught? Yeah. And if he got caught, he'd be tortured in a way that went beyond imagination. Ludger clicked his tongue and rummaged through his pockets. So I have to prepare. Ludger took out the pill box and tried to take the pills inside, but he realized that he had eaten all the pills the other day and stretched his hand to Hands. My suitcase. Oh, I brought it here. Hands brought a black suitcase hidden in the dark of the alley and handed it over to Ludger's hand. Ludger confirmed that his suitcase was intact, so you didn't open it. You think I'm crazy enough to open your bag? I couldn't open it even if I wanted to. Hands was fed up and denied Ludger's half-joking sentence. I know. More than that, did you meet Sheridan? The little kid. Well, of course I met him beforehand. He was the one who was waiting for you in the Empire at first. I'm sorry about that. You don't have to be sorry. Did you or us know this was going to happen? Ludger opened his suitcase and examined all of his personal items inside. It was still the same as when he organized and put the luggage in the suitcase before sending it. Ludger took out 2 pills from the pill box and poured them into his mouth. Hands looked at Ludger with a slightly pitiful eye. You're suffering a lot, too. Well, you're not the only one. Well, I suffer too, indeed, but come to think of it, you and I are both living while heavily dependent on drugs. But unlike narcotics, it's fortunate that our drugs have no side effects. So what are you going to do with your future plan? Do you have an appropriate method? Ludger is an unintentional identity, so there must be a lot of restrictions on him. I'll have to think about it later. Originally, he had intended to use Surin's power to control them or disrupt their plans, but that alone seemed to not be enough. It was too optimistic to expect Surin alone to take care of the Black Dawn Society. He also needed to move more actively and uproot them. Ludger, who was trying to lock the suitcase again, suddenly remembered something, so he asked Hands a question all of a sudden. Hands, if you arrived here 2 days ago, why didn't you ask me to meet you on that day? Why did you ask me to wait 2 more days? What do you mean? Why do you even ask? Rumors spread all over Leathervelk that a werewolf appeared at night 2 days ago. There was someone who even saw you in Surin. Hey. What do you mean? I just arrived in Leathervelk today. What? Ludger asked back without realizing it. It was the same with Hands. More than that, there were rumors of werewolves in Leathervelk, even before I came. Yeah, I thought it was you. No, I just came here today. And you know my personality. If I had come the day before yesterday, I would have asked you to meet me right away. What reason would I have to stand by here for 2 days? The 2 men were speechless for a moment. So who had caused the werewolf rumor to spread? Oh, woo, 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 woo. At that moment, a cry was heard from beyond the foggy darkness. In a civilized society, they were supposed to no longer face the dangers of wild animals. There was no way the 2 men in the present could not identify the cry of such an iconic beast. Hey. Yeah. Ludger leaned his back against the wall and was on guard, watching his surroundings. The sound of something moving fast with rough breaths in the wind echoed in his ears. It's really a werewolf. So it wasn't a rumor. It was real. Maybe. At that moment, Ludger and Hands looked up at the same time. In between the factories that were built with bricks, on the high rooftop, they could see a black shadow crossing quickly. A black furry beast shed a bloody red glow in its eyes through the air. The distinctive, disgusting smell of a beast could be smelled on the tips of their noses. His instincts sensed that it was not fake. Crazy. It was real. Shall we leave this place now? I don't think he can recognize us right away. Hands asked as he swept the goosebumps rising above his skin with his hands. It's only a matter of time. The werewolf was moving around fast, but it didn't go far away. It was currently wandering around the factories in the industrial area. It was currently looking for prey. It seems like there was something on the werewolf's neck. When the werewolf had shown its appearance in that brief flash, Ludger's eyes had penetrated the thick fog and clearly scanned the werewolf. What caught his eyes was something similar to an identification tag that was hanging on its neck. Is it the belonging of someone that it ate? No, it was more like a leash. Maybe he was mistaken. It was such an instant moment that he might have been mistaken about it. But the fact that the werewolf appeared in Leathervelk and its rumors also spread in Surin disturbed him to no end. Hands, I think I'll have to check it. Check it, you said. Don't tell me you're going to catch that werewolf? Something is fishy about that werewolf. Maybe someone artificially made him and released outside. What? Who the hell? I'll have to check it out now. Ludger said so and picked up his items one by one from his suitcase. He wrapped a leather belt around his waist. The multifunctional belt was full of empty holsters. Ludger put all sorts of things into the empty slots of the belt one by one. Thrown weapons, close combat weapons, drug bottles with chemicals. Lastly, 2 black revolvers. Clack. Ludger checked the firearms quickly and stuck them on his back. Click. Ludger even finished putting on gauntlets with mechanical devices on both of his arms. Looking at Ludger putting on his equipment one by one, Ainz recalled the first time he had met him in the past. "It's been a while since I've seen you use them." Despite the addition of all kinds of equipment, Ludger's appearance had not changed. As such, the tools that he used were very secretive and seemingly unobtrusive objects. "Was it when you were a cryptid hunter? Didn't you use an alias then, too?" "You are right." "What was your name at that time? You have used so many aliases, I don't really remember it. Van what?" "Van Helsing." With all the equipment on, Ludger got up from his seat while closing his suitcase. His face was shaded by his hat. Abraham Van Helsing. It was the name that Ludger had once used when he was a hunter. Chapter 22, A Hunter in a Mechanical Spring City. 1. 5 years before, the Kingdom of Derman, one of the small countries in the southern part of the continent, was plagued by a sudden infestation of cryptids. Wolves roamed in the middle of the city. Mysterious beasts ate people every night, and the nightmare of an endless blood scent continued for more than a month. Even the officers were helpless. Even though soldiers and knights were deployed, the cryptids evaded their siege by messing with the knights. The situation had been sluggish and unsolved. Among them, there was one of the most notorious cryptids. It was a monster that had invaded Javoden, one of the largest cities in the Kingdom of Derman. It was a rare monster that ate 3 knights who held the title of elite soldiers. The worst cryptid ever to dominate the horrors of the kingdom and a nightmare for Javoden. The monster of Javoden. The king of Derman thought that things wouldn't work out like that, so he had issued an official paper saying that he would give a huge reward to those who defeated cryptids. After hearing the rumors, all kinds of freelance wizards, wandering knights, and famous mercenaries from the continent gathered in the Kingdom of Derman and began a massive operation to suppress the cryptids. Countless cryptids had died, and a considerable amount of human beings had also died. People called the hunt Bloody Night because the blood shed at that time had the ground red. The Bloody Night was enough to instill fame in many people. At that time, there was one person who had made the greatest achievement. A person who single-handedly defeated the most notorious monster in Javoden and recorded the most achievements in shooting down and slaughtering cryptids. He was not a famous wizard, a high-ranking chivalrous knight, or an elite special mercenary. He was only a hunter. The hunter was adept at handling all kinds of tools and weapons, and during the year after the Bloody Night, he traveled all over Derman, setting up a record of defeating cryptids with a kill count of more than 3 digits. The name of the hunter, who was also famous as a mystic because he didn't actually reveal his identity, was Abraham Van Helsing. Fully equipped, Ludger slowly walked out to the boulevard. The damp night fog blanketed his coat. The blurry scarlet light spreads dimly around the street lamp as if it had consumed the water from the fog. The smell of the beast, which gently exuded among the reek of soggy mud, brushed against the tip of his nose. What a memory. Dumb. Ludger immediately kicked a drum that was lying around in the street. Ka-boom boom. As the drum collapsed, a strong noise echoed through the air. The werewolf, who was searching for prey, turned his head when he heard the sound. His ferocious eyes found Ludger standing alone in the center of the boulevard. Grrr. The werewolf jumped from the roof of the building and landed in front of Ludger. It's big. Ludger was able to get a closer look at the werewolf. He was over 5 meters tall, had bloodshot eyes, and his body was full of black fur. His sharp nails were pointed on both hands, and his energy was so creepy that Ludger could feel it in his skin. If he got caught by that thing, even steel would be ripped like paper. But most of all, what caught his eyes was the metal leash that was stuck in the werewolf's neck. I knew it. I wasn't mistaken. There's no way that was just hanging around the werewolf's neck without a cause. There was no way that a wild beast who lost his rationality would think by himself and wear that around his neck. There was only one possibility. Someone deliberately raised or made that werewolf. He thought that it wasn't completely impossible. It was a world where magic existed, wherein science had developed in a strange direction. And Ainz, whom he knew, had the body type that made him turn into a beast whenever he got bitten by a beast. Well, it wouldn't be strange if some secret organization made a werewolf as their experiment. The question is, why does it have to happen in this kind of timing? The incident happened not long after the start of Surin Academy's semester, when things had been quiet without much news until then. Also, in the year when he was appointed as the professor. He couldn't help but be suspicious about the situation that was so blatant. Well, I'll find out once I catch and beat him up. Ludger immediately got into his position. The werewolf distorted his face as he seemed to feel uncomfortable when the human in front of him raised his will to fight rather than run away. Oh. The roaring werewolf that was stretching his chest and raising his head to the sky rushed immediately toward Ludger. The werewolf, who ran fast on the ground with his 4 legs, was faster than a car. Ludger stepped back while watching his movement. The werewolf's claws passed through the air where Ludger was grrrrr. The werewolf waved his arms non-stop. Ludger continued to take back steps and focused on avoiding the werewolf. Thud. The moment the tip of Ludger's brown shoes touched the ground, a strange wavelength spread around him. Boom. Every time the werewolf's attack missed, Ludger continued to tap the ground with his toes and spread the wavelength of mana. In an extreme situation where he might be torn to the bone just by brushing against the claws, Ludger never allowed the werewolf to attack him. Gah. The angry werewolf roared and spread his arms wide. He was going to attack Ludger in that state and grasp him so that he wouldn't be able to avoid his attack. So he used his brain. Ludger's mouth, which was covered by the shade of his hat, smiled, eyeing. The werewolf, who was about to jump at Ludger, suddenly distorted his face and fell flat on the ground. Badump. The werewolf slipped over the mud that covered the ground. Oh, ooh. Ainz, who was watching nervously from afar, suddenly opened his eyes wide, confused at the sight of the fallen werewolf. Did he eat something wrong? Your head will ring a lot. Ludger gently stepped on the back of the werewolf, who was struggling in pain. The werewolf was more of a beast than a human, and since it was a canid, it was particularly sensitive to high frequencies that ordinary people couldn't hear. Ludger's stomping while avoiding the werewolf attacks was a preliminary preparation to cast such a spell. That spell, which moderately mixed sound waves and vibration magic, may have been nothing to humans, but it was different to werewolves, who heard sounds beyond a certain frequency range. Even then, the ultrasonic waves that rang the werewolf's ears in real time and shook its brains continued to shake the surrounding area. I don't have to use expensive silver. There was no more suitable way than that because the purpose was to suppress the werewolf, not to kill it in the first place. Now, let's check where the hell they made this guy. It was when Ludger took out a syringe and tried to collect his blood. Eyeing. Here it is. I heard a sound from here. Everyone, move quickly. With a whistle, uniformed policemen rushed towards them from beyond the fog. Police officers, who had been patrolling for 2 days due to rumors of werewolves, must have flocked as soon as they heard the disturbance here. Why does it have to be right now? When Ludger looked away for a moment, the werewolf, who had stayed still meekly, jumped up. Ludger hastily stepped back and avoided an incoming mishap. Ludger was immediately wary of the werewolf's counterattack, but the werewolf had no interest in Ludger in the first place. The werewolf shook his head a few times and soon turned his back and ran away. Darn, I didn't expect the werewolf to run away in this situation. Ludger sighed and released the high-frequency spell that was spread around him. When the police officers who were carrying mana appeared one by one, Ludger decided to slowly step back from his spot. There's someone there. Arrest all suspicious people. Before he knew it, the werewolf was climbing up the wall of the factory and climbing to the rooftop. Ludger ran after the werewolf. He was running through alleys, avoiding spells and the sound of whistles. Ludger, who was running through the dark alley, stretched his arm in the air as he felt that the werewolf was going farther away. Whoosh! The machine spring, which was hanging under the wrist of his gauntlet, quickly turned around, and soon a wire-mounted hook was shot toward the roof. Click. As soon as the hook was fixed to the roof railing, the cogwheel rotated and wound the wire at high speed. A tightening pulling force. Ludger used the rebound to fly up to the roof. It was Ludger's favorite item when he was active as a hunter, commonly called a wire launcher. Ludger landed splendidly on the rooftop. Ludger, who pulled the wire and withdrew the hook, witnessed the back of the werewolf that was fleeing far away. I won't let it go. Ludger put mana on his legs. Wizards that were in that world had methods of strengthening their bodies with mana, which had spread widely in case of unexpected situations. Ludger stormed out the roof and chased after the werewolf with his strengthened legs. Whoosh! The night scene in the industrial zone quickly passed by. He could see the werewolf that was running away gradually getting closer. The werewolf looked back as he felt a strange sense of presence as he ran. He found out that Ludger was chasing him, then accelerated his speed to escape. The werewolf, who was constantly jumping over between the roofs of the factory, jumped onto the huge railroad down there. Just in time, a cargo train loaded with magic stones was passing underneath. Boom! The werewolf landed roughly on the cargo train. Ludger jumped down and landed on the cargo train as well, scared to miss the werewolf. He minimized the shock of his landing by flowing the mana that was loaded on his legs to the soles of his feet. Ludger gazed at the werewolf with a flick of his hand over his shoulder. Perhaps the werewolf realized that he could no longer escape. He looked back at Ludger while raising his bent body. Clackety-clack, on top of the train, Ludger and the werewolf faced each other about 3 cabins apart. As the train ran, the strong wind blew Ludger's coat hem. The scarlet streetlights stretched along the streets and scattered around as it was reflecting the light. I was just going to control you moderately at first, grrrrrr, but I can't do that. Judging from his situation and the police officers around who were after him after hearing some commotion, he couldn't afford to do it. The night breeze that was passing by the edge of his cheeks and the steam emitted from the head of the train blurred the view for a moment. Hap. Using that moment, the werewolf rushed toward Ludger. It was a pretty sharp move to pierce through his opponent's weak point, using the moment when his opponent's view was covered. But Ludger had already calculated a couple of steps ahead of the werewolf's movement. Zee-eyeing. The werewolf, who was rushing toward Ludger, stopped running at the strange noise that rang in his ears. It was some kind of instinctive intuition as a beast. His judgment was indeed correct. Something sharp passed quickly on both sides of the werewolf's neck. Your intuition is good. As they cut through the skin of the werewolf's neck, they spun around and went back to Ludger. They were boomerangs with sharp blades that were spread out like a fan. If he was a little too late to stop, the sharp circular saw would have cut the werewolf's throat. The werewolf quickly regenerated the wound running through his neck. He was angry at the fact that there were wounds in his body, and veins popped out throughout his body. I was just going to finish you with that in one blow. Ludger left his regret behind and took out a wand hanging from his waistline and grabbed it. That time it was Ludger's turn to charge. He held a wand in his right hand and collected mana in his left hand to create a spell called Shining Stone. It was shot like a bullet and aimed at one eye of the werewolf. Whoosh! The werewolf bowed his head and dodged the shining stone. At that moment, Ludger flicked his left index finger. Then, the shining stone that passed by the werewolf made a turn in the air and hit the back of the werewolf's head. Bomb! While the werewolf was dumbfounded by the intense pain that he felt in the back of his head, Ludger rushed at the werewolf and swung his wand to the werewolf's face with all of his might. As soon as the werewolf tried to block it with his arms, a saw-blade boomerang flew and pierced through the werewolf's hands. Ludger had already expected it and threw the boomerang ahead of time. Ow! The bewildered werewolf opened his mouth wide and bit Ludger's wand because his arms were not able to move. Crock! His powerful teeth gripped and bit the wand. The werewolf's eyes bent like a crescent moon. Since he had already bit the cane, there would be nothing that his opponent could do. As soon as the wound on his arm regenerated, he was going to tear the arrogant human in front of him into pieces. But as if he was mocking such werewolf's thoughts, Ludger immediately took the next move. WHRRR. The handle and the grip of the wand were separated, and a white sword blade was pulled out of it. At such an unexpected sight, the werewolf could not even think of putting the empty shell of the wand in his mouth. Wand blade. Often referred to as a sword stick, it was more like an assassin weapon that pierced through the opponent's weak point rather than a weapon used head-on. And there was only one moment when he picked this in a fight that was aiming for each other's lives. It was only when he was confident that he could kill the other person. Ludger's body spun around once in his spot. Whoosh! A solid white line was drawn in the air. An extremely thin but vivid light gently split the werewolf's neck. Chapter 23, A Hunter in a Mechanical Spring City 2. HMP, phew. I almost got cornered and caught as a suspicious person. Ainz, carrying Ludger's suitcase, walked slowly through the dark alley while avoiding the eyes of the police who had suddenly come to the scene. It was just that day that Ainz had arrived there, but he didn't get lost because he had already memorized a map of Leathervelk City in his head. More than that, he went to catch a werewolf. When the hell is he coming back? As he thought so, something fell in front of Ainz from the air. It was a giant wolf's head that rolled to his feet. Heek! Ainz shrugged his shoulders and desperately held back the scream that was about to leak out of his lips. Surprised, Ludger walked slowly out of the darkness of the opposite alley. Shoes and leather trousers with a white dress shirt and a brown leather vest over it, and a long dark coat on the outside and a hat on his head. It seemed like Ainz might have plopped down on the spot if he didn't know who he was due to the intense pressure that was being emitted by his appearance. "Damn it, when you want to show up, say something before that. I almost dropped your suitcase," Ainz shouted with quivering lips. "You didn't, so it's fine." "Ah shit, is this the werewolf?" "Well, I'm not looking down on your skills, but I wonder how you managed to catch this horrible guy in that situation." Ainz, who checked the head of a werewolf who had died with his tongue stuck out, shivered and handed Ludger the black suitcase. Accepting the suitcase, Ludger turned his back and walked ahead. Ainz followed in Ludger's back. "Can you leave the head just like that?" "Yes, I don't need it anymore." "Why did you bring it then?" "To surprise you." "So you still remember me trying to tease you in the alley?" When Ludger was silent, Ainz sighed and raised his hands. "I get it. I lost, so let's not do that again." Seeing you do it, the two people who left the alley came out to the street where there was human presence with pedestrians here and there. "So what was the identity of the werewolf?" "Is it really cryptid?" "No, it was an artificial experiment made by someone." "Experiment? They're crazy. I'll have to watch myself while I'm in this town. It means that the people who made that are here." "I have something to tell you about that." "Something to tell me? I'm suddenly very nervous." "Can I not listen to it?" I get it. Tell me what it is." "I should move up the work I originally planned." "The work you originally planned? Don't tell me." "I think it's better here than in the capital." Ludger threw 2 bags at Ainz. Ainz took them and checked the contents. One was full of gold coins, and the other contained his beast neutralizer. "This is..." "Shouldn't we slowly settle down?" "But in Leathervelk, in a place that's in contact with Surin and where there might be the secret society, the Black Dawn Society." "There's even a gang in the back alley since it's a big city, though." "Yeah, you've gone crazy. There's plenty of funds for it, so do your best." "What about you?" "I can't move hastily because I'm an academy professor for now. The principal is still suspicious of me." "So I have to do this all by myself?" Ludger shook his head. "I'm not asking you to do everything. I'm asking you to gather important information first. Who's the gang in this city? Who's the mafia? How the underworld goes here and how we can get a spot there. You can figure them out and tell me." "I'll step up then." Ainz, who understood what Ludger was about to say, gulped down his saliva and soon smiled and nodded. "Yes, that's my specialty." Returning to the dormitory of the academy, I unpacked all my luggage in the accommodation. I had left it to Ainz to collect information by himself for the moment, but it will be fine. He didn't seem trustworthy, but his ability to gather information was unrivaled. I didn't take him around often for no reason. I should build up my own force to prepare for unknown situations. I couldn't move right away for the moment, so I decided to just prepare in advance. The principal was still suspicious of me, and I still didn't know exactly what the secret society of the Black Dawn Society was going to do. It was rather poisonous for me to move rashly. Having finished organizing my luggage briefly, I sat on a fluffy sofa and recalled what happened that day. That werewolf. It was an experiment deliberately made by someone rather than pure cryptid. The existence of werewolves was not surprising. Monsters exist in this world, and by then, they'd been driven out beyond the shadow barrier, which was the outside of the continent, but there were still traces of them. Cryptids were a prime example of the remnants. The subspecies of monsters were more like urban legends or ghost stories caused by the abnormal occurrence of moner, rather than the beings called as monsters. The werewolf I caught that time was also some kind of cryptid, but it was just a fake one, to be exact. Because experiments and spells that create werewolves have existed for a long time. There was a curse potion made by putting various medicinal herbs in the water with wolf's footprints in it, and mixing them with wolf's fur. It was a transformation potion that could make even ordinary people turn into a beast if they drank it. It was certainly black magic. Black magic was prohibited nationally, so they would be punished with an unconditional death penalty no matter what reason they had if they got caught. It also rarely circulated in the underworld, but how could they make a werewolf like that? Seeing that he even has a lab marker as the sign that he's an experiment, I don't think there's a lot of power involved in his creation. Seeing that it has a leash, are they mixing human genes after capturing wild wolves alive? There were signs of restraints and other traces of experiments engraved on the werewolf's body. It was certainly the result of science. A potion that corrupted humans and transformed them into beasts was the exclusive property of black wizards who had almost gone extinct. Science had intervened in that thing. Someone deliberately urged them to do it. Then who was that someone? Normal space was not enough to make that much of an experiment secretly. A fairly large laboratory was needed, and it should have been kept hidden from people. Space, confidentiality, and possible failure in the experiments. Considering all that, it meant that there was a big investor in the case who could provide a huge source of funding. An aristocrat or a millionaire. There must be a suspicious rich man in the empire. I shook my head. I didn't know who was suspicious enough, and since I'd eliminated the werewolf and finished collecting his serum, I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. It was the weekend after a long time, so I didn't want to be involved in any more troublesome work, and the next day was Sunday, so I wanted to rest well. Moreover, I have to prepare for what I should do for the next class. There were so many things that I had to deal with in many ways that I had a headache. Monday morning marked the beginning of a new week after a peaceful Sunday. I had breakfast with simple toast and coffee, and then went to work at my private professor's office in the main building. The class was the next day, but I had to show myself going to work for the moment because I was a new teacher. That's social life. After sitting at the desk in the office, I opened the day's newspaper that I brought from the accommodation. It was to simply check what happened in Leathervelk or Surin. But what the hell is this? The front page of the warm newspaper that came out just that morning was inscribed with a single prominent title in the coverage: an unidentified murderer in Leathervelk. Still in search last Sunday, 5 more people died in Leathervelk. As a result, the total number of deaths exceeded 10. The culprit has yet to be identified, but witnesses say it is a dreadful beast with black fur. Although the cops say that it's just a lunatic murderer and announce that they'd arrest it soon, citizens are still anxious. What is this? I read the article on the front page of the newspaper again and again. No matter how I looked at it, it was the werewolf that I had killed the previous Saturday. But the newspaper said that the death toll happened on Sunday. There were as many as 5 people. I definitely ended his life then, and yet there's a new victim. Does that mean there wasn't only one werewolf? It was the moment when I felt that the situation was going weird. Beep. Beep. The translucent crystal ball on the work table began to flash with a strange sound. I knew what that was. The principal is calling me. It was some kind of signal artifact to bring the professors together. That meant that there was a meeting to be held. I have to go. I stood up and put on my coat on the hanger suddenly. I remembered what Professor Selina had said during the meal on Friday. Some students had said they witnessed werewolves inside the academy, victims in Leathervelk, including sightings at the academy. Even if I excluded the one that I hunted, there might have been at least 2 more werewolves, maybe more than that. Trying to move on from such anxious thoughts, I headed to the meeting room where the professors had gathered. Chatter, chatter. The conference hall on the higher floor of the main building was full of professors, those who were clearly competent in their own teaching fields. When I went inside, people's eyes were looking at me. Most of the feeling that was emitted in their eyes was curiosity, but I knew it was directed at the source code that I had invented, not curiosity toward me. Professor Ludger? Here. A familiar pink-haired woman was seen swaying her hand in the corner. When I found out that Professor Selina was waving at me, I walked toward her. Is that person Ludger Chelsea? I heard he invented some pretty great spell. Is that true? I heard he's from a fallen aristocrat family. He's acting so high with that look. Among some professors, there were not a few people who looked at me with hostility who were descendants of the aristocracy. Their hostile and jealous stares were quite stinging, but I just shrugged it off. Professor Selina greeted me as I sat in an empty seat next to her. Did you have a good weekend? I had a good rest. Did you have a good rest too, Professor Selina? Yes, it's been a while since I had a good rest. More than that, have you heard the rumor? Did you mean the reason why we gathered this time? 2 first-year students were severely injured last night after they were attacked by an unidentified assailant. Selina explained that the situation was like that. Last night, it was said that 2 first-year students who were returning to the dormitory after going outside the academy were attacked inside Surin. The injuries were not life-threatening, but it was quite serious, and it was a big shock that such an incident happened inside Surin. And one of the students who just woke up that morning had said that a horrifying beast had attacked them. I guess the werewolf rumor that has been going around since last week was true. There were also victims in the nearby city of Leathervelk. I see. It was difficult to simply dismiss them as seeing some hallucination, and the wounds carved on the victims' bodies were said to have been scratched by a beast. That's why the professors were all gathered that time. First of all, it was mentioned in the contract that Surin's professors had to work with all their might in case of an emergency. That meant it was hard to calm things down with internal guards or employees alone. If the opponent is a werewolf, it would be much better to send elite professors than to put in unnecessary manpower. Surin's professors didn't only teach students normally. In other words, the professors' skills had been guaranteed to some extent at the time when they taught the prestigious Surin students. The principal is coming. When a woman in her mid-50s with wrinkles on her face said that, all the professors who were talking to each other became quiet. I was wondering who she was, and Selina explained it to me. She's Professor Mary Ross. She's been teaching in Surin for more than 20 years. Her field of teaching is pharmacology. I see. She'd been teaching for more than 20 years in Surin. It meant that she had great ability. She came forward and settled down the situation, and all the other professors were silent. The principal is coming. Then the door opened, and the principal came in. She was always beautiful. Along with her fascinating golden eyes, her two-tone hair with white and light pink naturally caught people's eyes. Good morning, everyone. The reason I called you in so urgently today is that I have something to announce to you. The principal got straight to the point without dragging more time. All the professors in the conference hall pricked up their ears. Recently, an unidentified assailant appeared inside Surin. In fact, last night, 2 new students who entered the school this year were attacked and seriously injured. Who's the culprit? It hasn't been revealed yet, but according to what the witnesses say, it was a werewolf, which means that it was done by a cryptid. The mention of the werewolf that was just rumor caused a stir among the professors. That can't be true, Your Honor. Aren't they mistaken? How come there's a cryptid in Surin? It was an avaricious middle-aged man who appeared to be in his mid-50s who stood up while speaking so blatantly. He parted his greasy hair neatly 2/8 and had grown his mustache, which made his face look full of grumpiness. It was like seeing an old boss that every school seemed to have. However, after he stood up, the atmosphere of the conference hall strangely changed. "Anything you want to say? Professor Hugo Berthag? This is Surin. This place is protected by the Exilian Empire." For such a werewolf to appear in Surin, I wonder if the students have been mistaken after believing the ghost stories that are currently circulating. "Professor Hugo, you don't seem to know anything. Didn't I just say there were already 2 victims?" "I know. Even the victims were children of noble families. That's why I don't think it was done by a werewolf." Hugo Berthag glanced at the crowd once. "I think the criminal is a fellow Surin student, a commoner at that." "What?" "Otherwise, there's no way that only the aristocratic children would be among the many students who got hurt. A werewolf attack in Surin. Rather than saying that, it is much more credible if some students deliberately pretended to be werewolves and committed crimes." The words certainly had a plausible persuasion, but I couldn't help myself but feel some instinctive displeasure at Hugo's words. Yes, he is not purely questioning the situation. He was just trying to nitpick at the principal's words and pass the blame on to certain students. Looking through the atmosphere, I nodded inwardly. Oh, I get it roughly. As long as Surin was also an organization, it was inevitable that factions existed within it. Students were divided into commoners and aristocrats, but the professors were not that different. The reality was that professors also had a subtle, strange atmosphere between commoner professors and aristocratic professors. The new teacher, Chris Benimore, who had just joined Surin, had also refused to eat together while commenting about me being a fallen aristocrat. I thought the Black Dawn Society would go against that, but I don't think so either. Maybe Hugo was the only one who acted rashly like that, but he would have known that there were quite a few people who secretly agreed with him. Some aristocratic professors united and formed a faction. And that faction didn't seem to get along well with the principal's faction. It's not enough for them to work together, but what kind of situation was an internal conflict like that? When I thought, is this what Surin's reality is like? A small bug climbed up the wall and crawled onto my shoulder. The moment I was about to bounce it off with my hand because I thought it disturbed me, I had no choice but to pause. It wasn't a bug. It was a small, thin piece of paper in the shape of a bug. Fortunately, others had not noticed it yet. I grabbed it naturally and checked the contents in a way that others wouldn't notice. It was fortunate that most professors' attention was focused on the war of nerves between the principal and Hugo. After checking the contents, I pressed my finger against my slightly throbbing forehead. 3 of the experimental subjects escaped. Immediate capture is required. Eliminate them if not possible. I could immediately see who sent the message and who was the mastermind behind the werewolves. But the most important thing was the last sentence. If the experiment's whereabouts is revealed, there is a risk that your identity will be revealed. Oh my God. Why do you give me such a hard time? Chapter 24, Black Dawn Society. 1. I crumpled up the note and put it in my inside pocket, and then I was immersed in contemplation. First of all, I knew that the Black Dawn Society was related to the werewolf crisis. However, considering that it was urgent to capture the werewolves and get rid of them if it was not possible, it meant that the werewolves' escape was probably unexpected by them as well. The problem is, if the werewolves get caught, the Black Dawn Society will suffer greatly. If they suffered greatly, it was no different than a boon to me. Even if I pretended to feel nothing on the outside, I welcomed such a situation with open arms inwardly. But if there was a problem, it was written in the last sentence. There's a possibility that your identity will get caught. In other words, it means that the identity of Ludger Chelsea was somewhat related to the creation of the werewolves experiment. I had to catch at least 3 werewolves. No, it was 2. In other words, I had to find and catch the werewolves before Surin did, and then kill them. Come to think of it, there was a mark on the werewolf. Maybe the mark itself was related to the people who did the experiment. The problem was that Ludger Chelsea was somehow involved in it. Honestly, if it wasn't related to me, I would have just left it up to Surin to take care of it. But because I was getting involved there, the story was different. If I got caught, I'd die. Professor Ludger, are you sick? It's nothing. I racked my brain while responding that I was okay to Professor Selena's question when she anxiously asked me about my well-being. For the moment, it had been confirmed that there were as many as 3 werewolves. I had caught one, so only 2 of them were left. One in Surin and one in Leathervelk. I must hunt them down. Meanwhile, the war of nerves between the principal and Hugo gradually headed toward the end. Well, it's up to Professor Hugo to be so narrow-minded, but I just want to make sure that you get the job done. So do I need to intensify the patrol? That's not all. I'm going to increase the number of people who do the patrol a little bit, and most importantly, we can't stay still until all the students return to the dorm late at night. Hugo looked blatantly annoyed at the remark. Rather than worrying about the student, he didn't seem to like the fact that someone like him had to go on a patrol that only employees should have done that in the first place. However, the incident had already taken place, and other professors were also aware of the seriousness of the situation. Even Hugo was in a position in which he could not directly oppose the order. Well, of course. Good. And other professors should also warn students not to go out late at night. If they violate the warning, you can give them a penalty point. It's the directions that I, the principal, ordered myself. Understood? Tusk. Understood. After the meeting, the professors rose from their seats and scattered one by one. I was also about to get up and go back to my office, but some people blocked my way in advance. Are you Professor Ludger Chelisi? I'm glad to meet you. My name is Daniel Masrak, and I'm in charge of astrology. Professor Ludger, this is the one who's in charge of the reinforcement class. It was obvious why they approached me. They want to ask me about the source code spell. The greed emitted in their eyes already told me that. I'm sorry, but I have to go because I'm busy. I immediately shook off their interest in me and left the conference hall instead of heading straight to my office. I moved to a secluded warehouse. I stopped at my spot because I thought it would be enough. Come out. The person who messaged me at the meeting must have been waiting for me to come out. There must have been something they wanted to say because they couldn't convey all their intentions within a few lines of messages. As soon as I spoke, I could feel a presence of someone who was hesitating over the pillar and sticking out their head. Speak. Her first impression was a girl who looked like a squirrel. Well, I thought I'd seen her somewhere, but she was one of the subordinates of the Black Dawn Society who tried to approach me 15 days after I entered Surin. What's the matter? So? She was visibly flustered, as she didn't expect to see me again. Then she showed herself completely from behind the pillar, and I was a little surprised to see her in Surin's uniform. I didn't expect her to be a student there. The reason why most members of the Black Dawn Society were hiding as employees there was because the student status could not be simply manipulated. In order to get in there, I was sure that they needed to have the talent or the ability to pass the entrance exam. I didn't know that the person who seemed to be a low-rank member of the society was a student there and that she was also a freshman who had just entered the school. At our first meeting, I didn't know because she wasn't wearing a uniform either. Let's move from here first. Follow me. Ah, yes. I took the lead and she followed. I suddenly remembered something, so I looked at my back and asked, "Do you like coffee?" Pardon? I sat face to face with the third-order student at a quiet cafe. She had been at a loss for some time and shrank her shoulders. I glanced at her. White skin and elaborate facial features, voluminous brown short hair with a slender build. I couldn't see her ears and her bangs were so long that they almost covered her eyes. It was literally like seeing a little squirrel. I guessed I wasn't mistaken when I saw that she was shaking at my intimidation then. I took a sip of the hot coffee in front of me and put it on the table with a loud sound. Tap, heek. The sound of the coffee cup and table touching each other made the girl curl her shoulders. Name? Pardon. I won't ask you again. Name? I'm Sedna Rochin. Is it a real name? Yes. It's not an alias. This is unexpected. Having a surname in this world meant that they were from a higher class rather than a commoner one, an aristocrat, a clergywoman, or a great rich merchant. Why did a woman who grew up in such a perfect environment go into a secret society? And she also had the talent to enter the academy, but could only become the lowest third order, no. It's possible that the more prestigious the family she came from, the less favorable treatment she would gain. The strangest part was that she was only a third order with that level of talent. Well, I'd ask her that later. I flicked my fingers lightly. Tell me exactly what happened, without missing a single thing. Oh, our surroundings? I casted a voice-blocking spell. Even if we scream here, the conversation won't leak out. Voice-blocking spell? As expected from Mr. First Order. It was weird for her to keep saying that I was the First Order. No, it was uncomfortable, to be honest. We'll have to improve that nickname first. Don't call me Mr. First Order from now on. Pardon? At my remark, Sedna opened her eyes wide as though she had just heard news that seemed like a bolt out of the blue. I didn't think I would make that face even if people said that the country was destroyed without any exaggeration. Do you want people to be suspicious? I'm a professor at Surin now, and you are the student. Yes, that's right. From now on, call me Professor Ludger. Ho, how can I be so profane? It's an order. Oh, order. She nodded while saying, understood. When I spoke in a strong tone that it was an order. However, contrary to the obligation that was ordered to her, her lips were constantly rising because she was happy to be able to call my name. So, what's the situation? Ah, yes. I'll explain everything. The recent werewolves incident that occurred at our Black Dawn Society, or, to be precise, at an affiliated organization that joined hands with us. I was confused for a moment at the sudden change in her tone of speech, but I nodded naturally. Keep talking, without missing a detail. Just like what Professor Ludger already knows, there are factions within the Black Dawn Society. Especially with Victor Dreadful, the other First Order who pushed this project the most enthusiastically. Yes, of course. Actually, I didn't know anything. But I pretended to know everything when responding to her words. Victor Dreadful. I'll have to remember that name. The Shamsa School, which was created by gathering the scientists who were kicked out of the association due to habitually using black magic and unethical experiments in the back alley, went into cryptid experiments as usual. What kind of experiment did they focus on exactly? Only a few of us know that, so I don't know that much. Oh, come to think of it, you lent your name when Mr. Victor asked for help. I just lent him my name. I didn't expect him to come this far. Looking at her response, Ludger seems to have been somewhat close to the person called Victor. It's just that their closeness would be poisonous for me at that moment. The Shamsa School must have undergone an experiment on cryptids, and their lab rats eventually escaped, and things turned out to be like that. It was their fault, so they should have taken care of it by themselves, but one of the escaped lab rats hid in Surin through the sewer. That's why there were victims the day before. Yes, this was something that even we, the Black Dawn Society, didn't expect at all. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm too talkative. I often make these mistakes when I get too thrilled. As expected, someone like me, Sedna Rachan's attitude had changed into a noticeably passive one, perhaps because she took my staring in a different way. I shook my head right away. No. Unlike your stuttering at our first meeting, your explanation was surprisingly good, so I was just impressed. I'm just feeling sorry. You speak better than I expected. You may explain further. It was nice to hear your explanation. Is that true? Yes, understood. After throwing a few compliments, Sedna immediately became happy and continued her explanation. I inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. If she stopped explaining, I couldn't find out any more information. I had to pull all the information out as long as I was being respected by Sedna, because I was covered in the shell of the First Order. It's surprisingly easy to utilize her. For the moment, Sedna Rachan was a Third Order member at the bottom of the Black Dawn Society, but her own abilities were quite outstanding. Starting from collecting information to continuing her explanations, our conversation itself was quite long and smooth. Sneaking the note that was sent to me was also part of her magic. However, why did she only become a Third Order with that level of skill? She seems out of place. The fact that Sedna had a surname meant that her family was a pretty well-off aristocratic one. Her reaction showed reluctance when she said her surname in her introduction. In other words, she doesn't like her family. Reluctance, sense of defiance, something much bigger than that. The problem was that she may have entered the Black Dawn Society by her own will, but it did not look like that at all from the perspective of other members. They thought that maybe she was a spy, and she herself had a loose screw personality, so she couldn't get along with the other members properly. To send me magic in secret, to be literate about a lot of information, to be admitted to Surin as a student. Her position is rather low compared to the outstanding ability that she has. It looks like, inside the organization, she is only considered as a pawn that's being used roughly before being thrown away. Just by looking at her, who seemed like she was dedicated to me, in the identity of someone who was known to have a trash personality, I could get a rough estimation. Sedna herself might be so passionate that she vowed allegiance to the Black Dawn Society, but the society itself was not happy with her presence. She tried to work harder as she seemingly realized that fact, but the situation did not improve favorably towards her, and she fell into a deep pit. From the standpoint of the Black Dawn Society, they're keeping her for now, but she's like something that they hesitated to use since they have so little interest toward her, but they still can't give up on her. No, there was no way a first-order executive cared about her in the first place. They were probably trying to use her as a sacrifice to do a mission that required her to risk her own life. I could picture her future without looking at it. Is someone from the Second Order going to get rid of her? It was a while ago that I saw a crack carved inside Surin at the meeting. And right then, at that moment, I could also see the cracks carved inside the Black Dawn Society. There was no perfect organization in this world. After all, the places where people live are all the same. This is maybe. It felt like I could see a way out when I found out that both parties had considerable disputes within each other. In a situation where Surin and the Black Dawn Society had been caught in layered problems just like a sandwich. If I did well, maybe I could gain something from Sedna. Once you catch the lab rats, it's better not to leave any evidence. The priority is to capture them alive, but we have no choice but to get rid of them as soon as possible since the people are getting noisy about it. There are 3 of them, so we'll try our best to. No, there are 2 of them. Pardon? I took out the werewolf leash that I had put in my inner pocket and showed it to Sedna. This can't be. I've already caught one of them. When on Earth did you? 2 days ago in Leathervelk. Her face was blank since she didn't know that I had caught one of the 3 werewolves already. As expected from Mr. First Order, her expression was one of extreme respect. Her trust level toward me had always been maxed out, but it felt like it advanced more. Anyway, are there 2 of them left? Yes. You said that the werewolf hid here through the sewer, so I'll expand the search around the sewer first. Surin still doesn't know this information, right? Yes, you're right, but I don't know how many more days it will last. Then I'll have to move right away. I said so and got up from my seat. Sedna looked up at me as if asking if the conversation was already over and immediately bowed her head as she thought her behavior was rude. I released the sound barrier that I had surrounded us with. Sedna Rachin, I've heard your story well. I'll see you next time if I have a chance. Yes. Professor Ludger. Sedna blushed shyly after saying so. If I looked at her like that, she looed like a fresh young girl of her age. How did such a child end up in a hideous organization called the Black Dawn Society? Well, she must have had her own circumstances. Well then, I left the cafe after drinking up all the coffee. Flora Lumos was going to go to the library and study leisurely because she had no class that day. She was usually just going to slack around, but recently she couldn't sit still because of a professor who had ignited her desire to learn more about magic. Thinking so, she was walking in an outdoor corridor with long, arched pillars. Oh. Beyond the second-floor window of a cafe not far away from her, she could see a familiar face. How was it possible for her to forget such a face? That was the man who taught the class that she took just then, Ludger Chelsea. But there was something fishy about his attitude. Who's the girl on the other side? Ludger, who seemed somewhat softer than usual, was having a face-to-face conversation with a female student. Chapter 25, Black Dawn Society 2. What? What are those 2 talking about? Ludger was having an in-depth conversation with a girl student. At least, that's what it looked like to her. However, no matter how much she wanted to listen to them with her ears, She couldn't hear the conversation between the two that was too far away. If it were just an in-depth conversation, Flora would have thought that Ludger was just giving career counseling or something related to his lectures to the student. But she saw it with her own eyes. A strange mana field was spread around Ludger and the girl. What's that? Magic. Judging from is it a spell to block sounds, Flora Lumos had a secret she hadn't told anyone. The reason why she was able to maintain the title of genius, even in Surin. The reason why she could see through the weaknesses of spells that she had never seen or learned beforehand. That's because Flora Lumos had a unique body type that was called. She could feel and smell of mana. Most people perceived mana or magic itself as only visual. It was because the magic technique used by others could only be seen through sight among the total of 5 senses of human beings. But Flora also felt in addition to that. She saw a well-organized magic technique, as though she was looking at a painting and smelling the scent of delicious food. Born in a noble family, she was so sensitive to those things that she found it easier than anyone to sense that odd feeling if a technique was slightly off. Moreover, if one splashed out of harmony with the other or if there was a nasty smell mixed in between ordinary smells. Flora had always discovered wrong magic in that case. Obviously, she perceived the right magic with a completely different sense from others, just like the that were floating around Ludger. As a professor whom she couldn't hold in check, the magic tricks around Ludger were also perfect without any flaws to be pointed out. She could not smell it because it was far away, but the of mana were so clear beyond the windows of the terrace. I can't believe he's having a conversation while using magic. What the hell are they talking about? She was curious. If it was just some ordinary professor, she would have ignored them and passed by. But she couldn't stand her curiosity because the other party was Ludger. Shall I go and just pretend that it's a coincidence? After thinking that far, Flora shook her head. Wasn't that too obvious? And it would certainly seem like she had an interest in him. I would never do that. Ludger was a wall that she had to climb. On the first day, she had felt such a great insult in front of everyone. Of course, there was no room for disagreement in her defeat. It was unacceptable to her pride if she spoke ill of the other party after losing a fair duel. The source code spell presented by Ludger was so powerful that she was bound to lose because of it. She had never heard of such a spell in the first place, so he beat her purely by magic, just like she had always done against other people. Still, he was somewhat wonderful. When Ludger performed the source code spell, Flora felt a sensation she had never experienced in her whole life, an indescribable visual pleasure and sweet scent. In particular, Ludger's source code spell was like looking at an elegant painting in which myriad metals of silver and gray were meticulously and solidly woven. Flora Lumos felt exceedingly proud of her magic because of her unique body type and talent, but she even felt bored because of it. But the source code shown by Ludger rekindled the spark in her boredom. She thought that she wanted to see more if there was anything else in his sleeves. However, there was an image that she had been building so far, so Flora was in a situation where she could not move hastily. I'll sneak a peek just once. The moment Flora was about to move, Flora? What are you doing here? Kaya? Flora could not help but be surprised by the voice coming from behind her back all of a sudden. Looking back, Cheryl, her best friend, was looking at her with a confused gaze. Cheryl. What are you doing here? What do you mean? It was you who asked me to study with you in the library. Oh, right, of course I did. Are you sure you're okay? Cheryl showed a subtle look of concern. It was already well known that Flora had received a hard blow instead on the first day of Ludger's spellcasting class. Because of that, some students who usually felt envious of Flora laughed at her. Cheryl was extremely worried about it. Just Tilda, it's nothing. What's in there? You seemed like you were watching something. No, it's nothing like that. Let's just go study. Flora pushed Cheryl's back toward the library. Even so, she couldn't avert her gaze from the second floor of the cafe that was getting farther away. Having been informed by Sedna Rachin, I told her to see me next time and immediately returned to my private office. I hung my coat on the hanger and sat on a fluffy sofa while resting my chin on my hands. Let's get this straight for now. There was a place called the Shamses School, where black magicians and crazy scientists joined hands. It was that place that created the werewolves as their experiment. Although it was a separate group from the Black Dawn Society, it was an alliance that held hands with the Black Dawn Society, or maybe they were just holding the same intention for a short time. The one who joined hands with the Shamses School was one of the executives of the Black Dawn Society, Victor Dreadful. Sedna's explanation suggested that the Black Dawn Society was responsible for the invention or research. The problem is that this occurred in Shamses School. 3 werewolf experiments that the Shamses School was secretly experimenting with had escaped. I didn't know exactly where the lab was, but the rampage that happened in Leathervelk meant that the lab was around there. The werewolf should have been captured as soon as possible in the early days of the incident, but the rumors had already spread in the city. It was impossible to simply keep it as a secret that had never happened since there were already people who died. One of the werewolves even had hidden in Surin and hospitalized 2 students. It was fortunate that there were no deaths in Surin, but the problem was that the situation had become more serious and out of control. It's right to ask them to take care of it by themselves because it's their fault. But the problem is that the Black Dawn Society also gave some support to this Shamses School's experiment. And in addition to that, the former owner of my identity, Ludger Chelsea, had also gotten involved in it. I would greatly welcome it if another member was being caught and tracked down, but it was different if I also got involved there. In other words, if I wanted to live, I had to catch the werewolves before others. First of all, my priority is to get rid of the werewolf who hid inside the academy. Just in time, security patrols have also stepped up. In addition to the existence of werewolves, the professors will also patrol until late at night, because it is clear that there is an unidentified assailant wandering around inside Surin. No one would find it strange if I got rid of the werewolf there. I thought I had quit hunting quite a while ago. 5 years before, I had ended my blood hunt and practically retired, albeit temporarily. The reason was not something fancy. Rather, it was because I became so famous. Of course, I had used the alias of Abraham Van Helsing so that my real identity wouldn't get found out. However, the source of trouble was that, after hunting the monsters in Javoden, many people tried to approach me because I had become so famous. So I retired while getting rid of the said identity and changed to a new identity. How many times have I changed my identity? The last identity that I had used was Gerard, a rich middle-aged man with a lot of money, and after that, I had become Ludger Chelsea. It was a fake life, not a real one, but I didn't feel particularly dissatisfied or suffocated. Was it because I was born again in this world after I had died once? My perception of life and death had changed to be a little different. Even so, I don't want to die again. I'd already died once, so I hated dying even more instead. I wanted to live longer and more comfortably. However, there were things to do for me to achieve that. It was originally just a part of my journey to the capital of the empire. That train attack had turned my life into a complete mess. First, let's focus on catching werewolves. I had to deal with the werewolves first before anyone else found them. I racked my brain while contemplating on how to catch the werewolves. The werewolf rumor among Surin's students was like a hot potato. Even the students, who had just dismissed the werewolf stories as mere rumors, finally accepted the existence of werewolves when the news that there were 2 students injured that time broke out. Those rumors were especially exaggerated because they were students. Obviously, the professors had to suppress the curiosity and vigor of the students as much as possible. You should study. Why do you believe such a false rumor? I'll surely give you a test today, so you should be focused. Those who fill wrong answers afterwards, you will be on your own. Everyone, there's a patrol this week, so you should go back to your dormitory as soon as the sun sets. If you get caught walking around, there will be a penalty point. Don't bring yourself to get some penalty points. You should take care of yourselves. Some timid students thought they should go back to the dormitory immediately after class due to the professor's warnings. But the number of students who didn't go back to the dormitory immediately was not small either. The more prideful a student was, the more they'd want to do it if they were being prohibited. Hey, there's a werewolf. Honestly, aren't you curious? So what? Let's catch it. What, didn't you hear that we will get penalty points if we get caught once we make a wrong move? Hey. Think about it. They're telling us that because they're worried about us, but if we catch the werewolf instead, wouldn't the school give us an award for doing well? What if the professors catch us before we find a werewolf? Then we just need to try not to get caught. There was even an official letter in the newspaper that said if someone caught a werewolf in Leathervelk City, they would receive a reward. The first-year students in particular, who had not yet tasted the bitterness of the reality that they were not that great in Surin, dreamed of becoming heroes by hunting the werewolves. It was when they were in the vigorous youth of their life when they wanted to be praised for being great and to show a good image to their peers. Aiden, what do you think? Leo asked him while looking apathetically at the students who were already excited about what to do with the reward they would receive after catching the werewolf. Just in time, Aiden, who finished taking notes of the formula written on the magic board, asked back to the voice that called him. Huh? What, you weren't listening? Why, what did you ask me? What do you think of the werewolf case? Ah, that? Aiden laughed awkwardly. Well, the professors told us to be careful, so I think I should just buy it. If we get caught, there will be a penalty point. Tusk, right. I knew you'd say that. What about you, Leo? I'm not the type that likes to take action as well. If there's a victim, then it's what professors need to do in the first place. A female student approached the two boys who were having that conversation. She had red hair that was tied in pigtails. She was a very attractive beauty with her coy eyes. She stood in front of Aiden's desk and slapped the table with her palm. Leo responded with, "She's here again," but Aiden was different. He greeted the girl, who stared at him with a bright smile. "Hello, Tessie. Good morning." "Good morning, you said?" Tessie Fried, the girl who received the greeting, wriggled her eyebrows while staring at Aiden instead. Leo sighed at her reaction. "Hey, if you lost in sparring, isn't it time for you to stop already?" "Lost. It was a draw. You haven't settled the quarrel with Aiden yet. And this is about me and Aiden. Can you not intervene?" Sigh. Leo shook his head. It hadn't been long since Tessie Fried had approached Aiden like that. It happened during the Battle of Magic, to be exact. Aiden, who didn't know anything yet, had a battle with Tessie, and that's where the relationship between the two began. The situation was advantageous for Tessie, but the problem was Aiden's unusual magic. Get yourself back together this time. We should use all of our power while not hiding each other's strength. I don't know. The battle then ended in a fairly vague result of a draw, but Tessie couldn't accept it. Tessie had always tried her best to study magic in order to revive her nearly fallen aristocratic family, the Viscount Fried. Coming into Surin, she had the idea that she should do the best in her first year. In fact, she was so outstanding that her entrance grades were in the top 5. However, it disturbed her pride that she failed to win a proper victory in the rankings of the magic battle class, and that she lost to a loose-minded commoner at that. Her pride was hurt. And the spell that Aiden was about to show then, it was certainly not a kind of spell that was normally seen. If the professor hadn't told them to end the battle, she could have seen what kind of spell it was. Anyway, stick with me today in the evening after class. I'm sorry, Tessie, but I don't think I can do it today. Then tomorrow. Tomorrow is a little. Why? What do you mean, why? There's a werewolf wandering around out there, so we can't do any activities at night. If we get caught by the professors, we'll get a penalty point. HNGG. Listening to Aiden's excuse, Tessie folded her arms and then sneered. You're trying to run away from me with that excuse, right? I know everything, so you are scared? It was a blatant provocation. Tessie expected Aiden to get triggered and shout, "What? No way!" But Aiden's reaction was different. Huh, yeah, then just think of it like that. Aiden had decided to concede in his position because he didn't want to have a fight with his friend. Although Tessie herself would strongly disapprove that she was his friend. He never expected that the mature response would give a scratch on Tessie's pride instead. Raising her eyebrows, Tessie shouted in front of Aiden's face, "It's a match, Aiden." "Huh, what kind of match? If you can't fight with me, we can just do something else." "Well, so what's? Werewolf. When the topic came up, Aiden and Leo stared at each other before staring back at Tessie again. They were already anxious about what kind of ridiculous offer she would bring up. The person who catches the werewolf first wins the bet. What do you think? You won't run away because you're scared, right? No. Okay, we'll do it. Leo. Aiden was about to reject it because it was dangerous, but he was shocked by Leo's action that cuts in his words instead. Okay, the loser will grant the winner's wish. You are the one who shouldn't be so meek to us. Listening to Leo's provocative tone, Tessie left after saying, "Of course." Leo, why did you suddenly accept such a ridiculous offer? You're stupid. If you said that you won't do it right here, then it's obvious that she'll bother us again. That's why I gave her a moderate agreement to pass it like that. Look, she went right away. Peace has finally come. Still, lying is bad. I wouldn't care about the werewolf in the first place. Idiot, is that the problem now? The professors will take care of the werewolves anyway. We just need to stay still. Whether it's a match or whatever, it won't be able to be decided in the first place. But Tessie seemed sincere about it. What if Tessie runs into a werewolf when she wants to hunt it before the professors do? Hey, she wouldn't do such a reckless thing on her own unless she was a fool. OHM. That's true, but honestly, I thought that if it was Tessie, she would do it, though. No way. Aiden and Leo looked at the back door of the classroom where Tessie had disappeared at the same time. No way she would do such a reckless thing, but could they answer no with confidence to such a statement? Is she for real? I told you so. Tessie, whom they'd met for the past few days by then, had the personality which she would definitely do what she said she would do. She had a strong character in which she would grit her teeth and still do it even if it was dangerous. That was Tessie Fryad. The two of them looked right out of the window. There, they could see a familiar girl with red hair huffing and puffing while heading somewhere. The direction was the opposite of the women's dormitory. She was heading to a dangerous forest where the professors had warned never to go at the beginning of the semester. We're in trouble. They had to stop her. Chapter 26. Werewolf? 1. Sedna Rochin recalled her dreamy encounter with Ludger with a blank face. Mr. First Order had recognized her. She always made a lot of mistakes, and even within the Black Dawn Society, she was considered as an outsider, yet Ludger Chelosy had recognized her. I wasn't wrong. Rochin, the leading big merchant family in the empire. Sedna was born as a child there. It may have seemed like a good family to others, but for Sedna, the Rochin family was a place worse than hell. Her last name, Rochin, always followed her just like a curse, and it was the same when she left her family, Rochin. In order to escape from that hateful family, Sedna had entered the Black Dawn Society, to get rid of Rochin and to find her real self in the Black Dawn Society. Even after knowing that the society was antisocial and immoral, she still chose that path. She could be different there. She could live by herself, not as the Rochin family's insignificant daughter. But the reality hadn't gone that way. As the Black Dawn Society was a place of resistance to the world, most of its people were low-class people or criminals who operated at the bottom of society. In such a place, Sedna, who had Rochin as her surname, was so different from their kind. What? You have a surname? Is it for real, Rochin? Why in the world would someone from such a great family be here? Be careful. She could be a spy who sneaked in here, those damned upper classes. Unlike them, who came up from the muddy water, there was no way they could see Sedna, who came down from the top, as someone on the same board with them. That's why she was called a Third Order, even though she was talented in magic and had entered Surin. The surname Rochin eventually made her feel out of place even at the Black Dawn Society. Even though I just wanted to be recognized. She wanted to get rid of her hateful family, so she had entered the Black Dawn Society. Eating well and living well wasn't her goal. She believed that if she tried hard, the gazes of caution and contempt toward her would gradually change. She wanted to believe that. However, the vigilance of the members of the Black Dawn Society toward Sedna became even worse, and she became an object of envy and jealousy because she even had the ability to enter Surin. Originally, Sedna was a talented person who could occupy a position above the Second Order. Without even being able to receive the attention of the First Order, She continued to stay at the low rank of the third order due to being kept in check by the other members. A good pawn to be used before being thrown away. Just a little useful human being. They could utilize the name of the Rochin family that she had. Their intention was so clearly conveyed that it brutally ripped through Sedna's tender heart. But I met him. When she was tired and thought it would be fine for her to meet any kind of ending, orders were issued to her in the organization. It was an order from a second order a little higher than her first order. Code name. Unlike other first orders, he was an unknown existence whose real appearance and identity had not been revealed. She was asked to contact him and check the progress of his mission. The man, who was being called Ludger Chelisi, was a master of disguise and an executive who specialized in infiltration and assassination, and who never revealed his true identity. But there was a flaw. His personality was very trashy. He was a psychopath who beat people up in their seats when he was annoyed or even killed them in the worst case, even though those people were fellow secret society members. Even Zero Order, the leader of the Black Dawn Society, turned a blind eye to such behavior. Unless the other party was the same First Order executive, Ludger was bound to be a symbol of fear within the Black Dawn Society. Having been tasked with asking him why he didn't contact them was practically no different than sending her to die at his hands. Sedna Rochin shed tears of resentment. She was resentful to the Black Dawn Society's colleagues who had told her to go and die. And she was also resentful to her cowardly self, who couldn't deny such an order properly. What she hated even more was the idea of giving it all up and living as the Rochin family's daughter again. I don't want that. She hated her family so terribly that she might as well die instead. So she approached Ludger. With the mindset of having been determined to die, it didn't matter if he killed her. But when she got closer to him, the man's charisma was beyond her imagination, and Sedna shuddered without realizing it. She made a slip of the tongue, and her voice trembled. She had done pretty much everything she shouldn't do in front of him. I may die. That was what she thought. But to her surprise, Ludger did not kill her. He didn't even show a murderous intent. Just as the rumor went, she felt that his personality was trashy and ill-tempered during their conversation. But that was all. Ludger let her go without saying a word. And just then, Ludger even praised her for her good explanation instead. She wouldn't have been that happy if it was just a lip service. But in Ludger's flattery, she could feel his honest behavior. From correcting his title that he was Professor Ludger, not First Order, he listened to her more cautiously than anyone else, even though it might be just a pretense. She was extremely happy because of it, because she thought that she might be helpful to someone. She felt like tears were coming out of her eyes. Mr. First Order. No, Professor Ludger Chelisi is really great. She felt her heart beating when she saw him starting from their first meeting. She thought it was because of tension and fear at that time, but the meeting she had just had made her realize for sure. It was a sense of awe. It was an endless adoration for the man she truly wanted to serve. She didn't think she was treated like that because she was special. It was nothing more than a small, small reward for the misfortune and effort that she had experienced until then. Ludger Chelisi may have done some good deeds for his subordinates as an executive of the organization. It was still too early for her to be elated because of that already. Still, even so, it was the first time someone praised her for doing well. When it was time to leave school and the sun was setting, Ludger packed his outer clothes and examined all his equipment. In order to properly hunt the werewolves, speed was essential. And of course, all the tools needed for hunting had to be prepared. They were highly secretive items that were not very visible on the outside, so people who encountered him while passing by wouldn't be suspicious of him. Ludger, who left the professor's office while thinking so, met Hugo, who was visiting him just in time. "Oh, Professor Ludger?" Professor Hugo Bertag. Hugo Bertag. His family was Marquis Bertag, a famous magical great family with a long history in the Exilian Empire. However, due to their excessive magical and authoritarian tendencies, the family was gradually on the decline due to their inability to accept modern science properly. A representative man who was at odds with the principal at the meeting in the morning visited Ludger. "Do you have a business with me?" Who, you punk? Do I need to have some business in order to come and see you? Hugo's exceedingly friendly attitude. That's what he said, but Hugo went there to make an offer to Ludger. You haven't seen the other professors properly yet, right? It seems like you're only close to the other new professors. What's wrong with that? Hugo wriggled his eyebrows at Ludger's rigid attitude, which did not even bend, let alone be intimidated by him. However, it was him that would be at a loss, so Hugo decided to endure such an attitude and move on. Ahem. I'd like to introduce you to the professors I'm close to, though. Listening to Hugo's subtle offer, Ludger immediately noticed what purpose he had in visiting him. Faction recruitment. Hugo intended to bring Ludger to a faction that consisted only of aristocratic professors. Even in a situation where students were anxious because of werewolves, was it a fight to divide the professors into groups for the sake of power? Ludger shook his head in laughter at Hugo's attitude. I'm sorry, but I'm already comfortable right now. What? Hugo's face turned red at Ludger's direct refusal. He had already spoken very nicely, but not only did such a fallen aristocrat not thank him, he even rejected Hugo's offer. Do you know how many years I've been a professor here? Do I need to know? It's been 15 years. It means I'm the next highest professor except for that old lady, Mary Ross. It means I'm a senior and superior far above you. Superior, you said? Yes. That's strange. My only superior is the principal. Principal. Hugo gritted his teeth at that word. For Hugo, the name principal was not welcomed at all. It was more of a disgust that awakened his inferiority complex and anger instead. Hugo, who immediately managed his facial expression, opened his mouth. Professor Ludger, I heard you were in the military before you came here. It was just a short stay. Didn't you say that you achieved brilliant military service as you hunted the cryptids? Did he already obtain that much information? Well, it was a specification that was intentionally spilled by the Black Dawn Society anyway, so it was not strange for a person like Hugo to know about it. Ludger nodded his head. I'm saying this because I admire your ability. Don't you want to bring back your fallen family? With the support of our aristocratic faction, it's possible. Hugo chose to make the most persuasive argument that could make Ludger give in. He was anxious. The principal's faction was getting stronger day by day. Even Hugo could not be off guard against such a woman, especially because she was a 6th-rank lecture wizard and had natural political ability even though she was young. If it weren't for her, I'd be the next principal. Hugo was dissatisfied with it. Moreover, the president was not only being nice to aristocratic students, but also taking care of the commoners more instead. There were as many as 5 new professors, 3 of whom were commoners and 1 of which was a fallen aristocrat. There was only 1 pure-blooded aristocrat. It hurts my pride, but Ludger Chelsea? I must bring this man to our faction. It was already known that he comes from a fallen aristocrat family. Normally, he wouldn't have given a look at him, but he couldn't help it because the situation was urgent. In addition, Ludger Chelsea was a 4th-rank wizard at a young age and a fairly capable man. That was also the case when he posted a military achievement on cryptid hunting. There was no more coveted and talented person except him, with the exclusion of his birthplace. That's why Hugo visited him directly. I can help you. So what do you think about holding hands with us? What exactly does it mean for me to hold hands with you? That time, instead of answering with no, he asked back. Hugo continued, thinking that Ludger was finally interested in his offer. In other words, do I have to accommodate the aristocratic students? Oh ho, you just need to show them a little bit of flexibility. Hugo thought Ludger was almost giving in. This man who served as a soldier in the first place was probably trying to rebuild his family by somehow building some achievements. Hugo judged Ludger's track record as such. Then I can't do it. What? Hugo asked back foolishly as he did not know that he would get a rejection there. I appreciate the offer, but I reject it. Are you serious with that? Yes, you are telling me to treat the students differently and discriminate against them. I'll pretend I didn't hear it. It's not discrimination, I'm just telling you to be flexible. Then I'll ask you. If the principal gave a particular commoner student a better benefit and wrapped it up as flexibility, would you be willing to follow it? What? Is a commoner the same as a noble? You have to say something that makes sense. That's exactly what I mean. What? Hugo showed a blank face. That's exactly what I mean, he said. What does he mean anyway? Flexibility should eventually be applied to both sides, not to either side. But if flexibility only applies to the aristocracy, it's no longer mere flexibility. It's a privilege. No, I mean the aristocrat. There are no commoners, nor aristocrats, nor royalty inside Surin. They're all just students who receive magic lessons. I have no intention of bending this idea. Hugo clenched his teeth at Ludger's remark. Hugo raised one side of his lip to calm his anger and mocked Ludger. All right. I wasn't thinking straight. By the time you got here, I was overlooking the fact that the principal might have used her authority in your appointment. I don't know what you're talking about. Ludger meant it. He had no intention of getting involved with a man like Hugo in the first place. Helping him to raise his fallen family back up. Then they'd find out that his family was fake. From Hugo's point of view, it was meant to help him. But for Ludger, he was nothing more than a meddlesome man that would expose his identity. He didn't even want to revive his so-called fallen family in the first place. His only purpose was to stay there for 2 years without getting caught. Moreover, it would also bring troubles to him if he joined hands with Hugo and confronted the principal. No matter how he saw it, Hugo and the principal were not equal. Hugo himself may not think so, but in Ludger's view, the principal was much more overwhelming. If I do something weird and get caught in the eyes of the principal, I will get worn out. There was a tiger in the mountain, so he must have no brain if he was also holding hands with a fox. It would be ideal to walk a tightrope without belonging to either side. So Ludger was bound to make a choice as the other party was clinging to him so blatantly. If he had to choose between the two, of course, he'll choose the principal. It was more convenient for him to choose the principal, who treats everyone equally rather than the authoritarian nature of the aristocracy. I have to go on patrol now, so I'll be on my way. Professor Hugo, you might be in danger, so please go in first. You'll regret it. I'll bear it in mind. Ludger's provocative words turned Hugo's face red like a boiled octopus. His thick cheeks quivered, but Hugo could not say anything to Ludger's back, which had already left him. To be honest, it was because he was scared by the appearance of Ludger, who was staring at him. He was a lot more senior and a lot more prestigious than Ludger, so why was he even scared? Hugo didn't want to admit that fact. Arg. Hugo stomped on the innocent ground, then he huffed and puffed while leaving that place. If there was a student that he caught red-handed wandering around that night, he thought about giving them a penalty point. Ludger, who separated ways with Hugo, patrolled outside. Before he realized it, the magical lights were turned on inside Surin after the sunset, and the lights were spread around in his surroundings. The night, which was supposed to be silent without any sense of presence, finally emerged, but strangely, darkness was still alive. Ludger sighed inwardly and headed to a nearby bush. So you didn't listen to the order that told you to go straight back to the dorm. As he broke through the bush that was protected with magic, the students who were hiding inside it swallowed their breaths. Ludger spoke coldly while staring at the 3 students who were looking up at him dumbfoundedly. Or you listened to the order, but you're acting boldly. Professor, it's not that, but all of you have 5 penalty points. Chapter 27, Werewolf 2. Then I went on patrol and captured nearly 20 students, gave them penalty points, and forced them back into the dormitory. I mean, why did those guys keep wandering around at night? The first years were immature because they were new students, but I had a headache seeing that the second years were also caught in my patrol. That's how much everyone's interested in this werewolf case. The sun was already setting, and darkness blanketed the surroundings. There were still quite a lot of students hiding inside Surin's land, although security guards were walking around and other professors were patrolling. Even though they are just students, they are kids who can use magic, so ordinary employees can't find the kids who are hiding. The werewolf case must have fueled their spirit of adventure. To be honest, I was just going to ignore them and pass by, but I couldn't let them be because each one of them stuck out too much, and it bothered me. If I just ignored them, it was obvious that they would go even wilder when they became proud that they were not caught by the professors. I couldn't stand that. There are a lot of them. Most of the students were obsessed with the idea that they would capture the werewolves. I wondered why they were like that even when they would get penalty points if they got caught inside the school. It turned out that it was because of an official letter that came from Leathervelk. If they killed the werewolves or captured the werewolves alive, the city itself would pay them a reward. It was no wonder that it made the students' jaws drop. With the desire to be a hero, there's no one whose jaw wouldn't drop when they would get paid, and their reputation would go up if they caught the werewolves. Even ordinary people who were short of money would be fascinated by the prize money that they would get from knocking down the werewolves. In the case of commoners, there was a system that supported scholarships and self-funding within Surin, but it did not provide all the magic textbooks and various other supplies. There were so many things that the wizards had to pay for. The same went for students. If they became a hero in that case, they might have sponsors who noticed their abilities, so it was no wonder that everyone coveted it. Some boy students seem to have done it because they couldn't beat their youthful passion of getting attention from the opposite sex. But since I've sent most of them back to the dormitory, I'll have to start tracking the werewolf again. It took a lot of time. Besides, I realized that the situation was worse than I thought. I didn't know there would be so many students. Other professors must have also felt that something was strange and done the patrol more diligently. If someone other than me found the werewolf first, and if they noticed that it was not a normal cryptid but something manufactured from a laboratory, the situation would spread like a forest fire that was even more out of control. So before that happens, I should deal with it. I headed to the sewage treatment plant, the most likely route that the werewolf went through in order to sneak into Surin Academy. Since Surin had a vast land, there was quite a lot of water used in Surin, so there was a huge sewage treatment facility outside the land. A place where a huge amount of water was drawn from the Ramsey River, and at the same time, a large amount of water was discharged through a huge earthen pipe. Considering the size of the werewolf that I encountered at that time, it was highly likely that it went back and forth through the earthen pipe. Fortunately, no one has come here yet. Most professors went on patrol and sent students back to the dormitory or prepared for an unknown situation. There was no one who thought about where the werewolf came from or how it moved or chased its prey like me. Well, it was because that was not the way a wizard did it. It was a hunter's method. Walking around the darkened sewage treatment plant, I finally found a trace. Footprints. The footprints that had clearly stamped on the bushes seemed to have been engraved there for days. Other people would have been naturally passing it by, but I didn't miss it. After I approached the footprint and swept it with my hands, I was sure. Comparing the size by its footprints, it's a little smaller than the one I encountered then. It must be pretty intimidating. However, there was one problem. There were two kinds of footprints. Even the werewolf with a relatively larger size appeared to have made some footprints recently. Don't tell me. Are both of them in Surin already? I thought there was only one, but the footprints show that the guy who ate people in Leathervelk also came all the way here. I moved slowly and chased after the tracks. The two steps initially moved in the same direction, but then split on both sides. The small one to the right, the big one to the left. I didn't expect those guys to split up there. Originally, the wolf had a lonely image, but in reality, it was a beast that flocked groups. Of course, the same went for werewolves who had inherited such strong tendencies. Normally, they should have stuck together. I didn't know why, but those guys were moving separately from that point. I had to make a choice. I'm in trouble. I'm too late. Lynn, who had ash-gray hair, which was rare even in Surin, was running on through Surin with magic textbooks in her arms. It was a while ago that she forgot to go back to the dormitory and fell asleep while studying in the library. Looking out the window with her hair clinging to her cheek, she rushed out of the library in a hurry when she saw the sun setting. While running toward the dormitory, Lynn had no choice but to blame herself. Stupid. Idiot. Why did I have to doze off there? In recent days, her fatigue had accumulated, perhaps because she had concentrated on homework and studying more and had reduced her sleeping time. Surin was uneasy, so the professors threatened students to go back to the dorm right away without doing anything else after school. The source of trouble was that she opened some books in the library with a complacent thought that she would study a little more, then fell asleep. It was also a student's duty to control their body condition. Just because she dozed off due to her forgetfulness didn't mean it wasn't her fault. If she was caught by the professor, there was no excuse for her to avoid a penalty point. Still, getting a penalty point is a bit painful. As she was tight on money, she was in a position that required her to survive on a scholarship in Surin. However, Surin's scholarship support amount decreased if the student had a penalty point. When the student's penalty points were serious, their scholarship application itself was sometimes rejected. She wouldn't be penalized so badly for 1 point, but the fact that she might get a penalty point itself came as a burden to her. Still, can't I just go back to the dorm before I get caught? She also had to avoid the eyes of the dormitory supervisor, but she was confident that she would not be caught by the supervisor, not the professors. Somehow. Lynn continued to move anxiously and walked fast on a road that was being illuminated by streetlights. When she thought that she would certainly get the penalty point, she had some hopes that there was a possibility of her not getting caught, but she didn't want to move while hiding in the dark. Even so, it's too much. How come no one woke me up? After thinking so, Lynn sighed deeply. Originally, it was the basic principle of students attending the academy to make friends and get close to each other. But it was largely due to the controversy caused by disputes with nobles from the beginning of the semester that she couldn't do so. Due to Dynamo Romley's disciplinary action, Lynn was considered an arrogant commoner who insulted the aristocracy, according to the aristocratic students. Other commoner students were intimidated by the aristocrats and decided they should not go near her. Still, there were some boy students who asked her if she was okay the next day after the incident. Her appearance was the only reasonable excuse why those students were approaching her. Lynn didn't feel like wanting to get close to those people. The librarian is gone, too. They didn't even want to wake me up in the first place. Perhaps the employee who worked as a librarian in the library was also on the side of the aristocracy. I'm already being disliked. Lynn bit her lips as she felt sad about her situation. It was the moment when she decided to go back to the dormitory, wash up, and organize what she had learned in the day's class. Russell. Who is that? Lynn stopped her footsteps unconsciously and shuddered. She must not have been mistaken when she saw that the grass shook greatly beyond the darkness where the trees were planted. Who, hurry up and come out. If you don't, I'll call other people. Lynn had also heard the rumor that was circulating recently of a werewolf. There were actually 2 people who had been hurt, so she couldn't dismiss them as false rumors. To think that maybe there really was a werewolf that had been rumored. A chill of fear flowed down her spine. No way is it really a werewolf. Lynn stepped back, moving her shaky feet. At that moment, the rustling sound in the dark approached her quickly, and something popped out from inside the bush. Lynn shouted while closing her eyes tightly. Help me. I'm not delicious at all. If you eat something like me, you'll only get a stomachache." However, the expected shout of the wolf was not heard. There was also no pain. Lynn cracked open her closed eyes slightly. The first thing she saw was blonde hair that shone brightly in the dark under the light of a street lamp. Leaves were stuck here and there on her body, but her nobility had not faded the slightest bit. Looking at her with her hands on her waist, she was Lynn's senior, 1 year above her. She was the princess of the country. Really? What do you mean I'm going to eat you? Isn't it rude to say that in our first meeting? Oh. Lynn immediately noticed who the person in front of her was. No, how could she not recognize that iconic person in the first place? Why, Your Highness, the third princess, Elendil von Exilian. Lynn had also seen her in Ludger's class before, so she bowed her head immediately. When she saw the princess, she was so shocked and shouted, "Don't eat me," so it was not strange to hear her say something about profanity. However, when Lynn was about to bow her head, Princess Elendil stopped her. "No, it's fine. You don't have to do that." But it's my fault that I surprised you in the first place, and this is Surin. Did you forget? Everyone is equal in Surin. You and I are the same." Listening to Elendil's dignified words, Lynn opened her mouth with an A without realizing it. She didn't expect to hear Surin's ideology from the mouth of the princess herself. Regardless, Elendil was only focused on shaking off the leaves on her body. "Oh, but why is your highness in this place? I told you not to call me your highness. You're a freshman, right? Then just comfortably call me Elendil in a casual way. Me, because it's more comfortable for me. I don't have any intention of acting impudently with my status in Surin in the first place. Did you say your name was Lin? Oh, do you know me? We're taking the spell casting class together. I have a good memory. You're amazing. Well, that class is really unique. I remember most of the students in that class because it was so intensely craved in my memory. And you're pretty noticeable, too." "Oh, was she talking about her hair?" Lin smiled bashfully. She never thought she'd get attention from the princess because of her hair. "So why are you wandering around here late at night? Didn't the teachers warn you?" Well, that's..." Despite her shyness, Lin honestly explained why she was moving alone that late at night. After listening to her whole story, Elendil opened her eyes wide. "What? No one woke you up? Isn't that too much?" "No, it's still my fault that I dozed off. No, I can't just let it be. How could they do such a dishonorable thing? I will say something to the librarian as soon as More than that, what were you doing here?" Lin hurriedly changed the subject because she thought that it had become complicated on her part. "Oh, you mean me? I'm still in charge of finding and sending back students who haven't returned to the dorm. Everyone must have been so loud right now. Aren't you a student too?" "You don't have to worry, I'm moving with permission." "Oh, I see. Anyway, hurry and go back to the dorm. Oh, if you keep going through this path, there's another professor, so if you go back to the dormitory through this path, they won't see you." "Oh, yes, thank you." It was the moment when Lin was about to leave while bowing her head grrrr. A strange sound came to Lin and Elendil's ears. If they hadn't heard it wrong, it was definitely the sound of a beast. "Lin, stay back." Elendil glared at the darkness and pulled out her wand. There were a pair of red eyes floating in the dark. It came slowly towards the two of them. The streetlight showed a werewolf beneath it. I didn't think the werewolf was real. The rumor wasn't fake. Why are you so surprised? You were surprised the first time you saw me as well. Well, that's because anyone would be surprised if you suddenly come out from the dark like that. Anyway, this is a big problem. The werewolf in front of them did not look weak at all. The eyes that were glaring at them obviously consisted of murderous intent. Lin and Elendil were pretending to be tough, but they were actually very scared. Still, as students of Surin, if they couldn't do anything, get out of the way. At that moment, there was a strong flame in the air. The high-temperature flame engulfed the werewolf and burned its whole skin. Whoosh! The werewolf rolled on the ground, screaming. Perhaps because of the beast's instinct to avoid fire, it did not die from a direct hit, but its flesh and fur melted down since it could not avoid the blow. Its wounds were also recovering quickly, but it was enough to buy some time. Both women's eyes turned to the place where the magic was casted from. There stood a man. Lin shouted his name without realizing it. "Professor Ludger?" Ludger Chelosy. He was wearing a black suit and a black frock coat, still neat and stylish. Ludger's icy gaze moved away from the werewolf and turned to Lin and Elendil. Ludger opened his mouth to the two people who were overwhelmed by such spirit. Lin and Elendil von Exilian. Yes, Professor." The two waited for Ludger's next words, feeling fortunate that he had come to rescue them. 5 penalty points for both of you. Chapter 28, Werewolf 3. Pardon, W8, aren't you supposed to ask if we're okay at times like this? Elendil thought she had misheard Ludger's words. The professor who saved them from the werewolf said he would give them penalty points as soon as he saw them. It was indeed breaking the atmosphere, but from Elendil's point of view, it was quite unfair. "Elendil, what are you yelling about? I got permission from another professor? Shut up." "Even if you get permission, it's something you can only do if there's no danger. Don't you know what you were about to end up like? That's. Your mouth is still able to move even though you can't even manage your body properly, I see. Ludger was ruthless even though his opponent was a princess. Elendil could not refute what Ludger said. She was able to walk around like that in the middle of the night because of her status as a princess. It was easy for her to send the students who were at the peak of their excitement back to their dormitory, with their heads bowed down just because of her status as a princess. Because Elendil herself, as a princess, had a sense of responsibility to keep the students from being in danger and was preoccupied with that role. Although in the end, she had to be in danger first before she realized that she had her priorities wrong. Realizing that, Elendil bit her lips and clenched her fist. There was nothing wrong with what Ludger said. Then, at least remove the penalty points for her. What? Ludger's eyes turned to Lin. As Ludger recognized Lin, whose shoulders all tensed up, he soon stared at the textbook that she was holding in her arms. Lin. Yes, Professor Ludger. What are you doing, not going back to your dorm? That's. I acknowledge your enthusiasm for studying, but don't you know that if you do that in this situation, you'll be a nuisance to others? I'm sorry. Ludger shook his head. Whatever he said there would just exhaust him emotionally, and it wasn't a fundamental solution either. Elendil. Yes. You should take responsibility for Lin and send her back to the dormitory. If you do that, the penalty points that I just gave you will be dismissed. Pardon, is that for real? Should I say that again? No, I understand. Elendil replied that she would do that, but she couldn't get rid of her sudden curiosity. Wait. Why is there such a big difference between him talking to me and him talking to Lin? He had been giving her criticism and telling her to get her senses together and such, but he was actually asking a question to Lin in a more concerned manner. While she was thinking about whether to argue about it or not, the werewolf who was burned by the flames jumped up. PR Professor? There. I know. Ludger stared at the werewolf while standing in a position to protect Lin and Elendil. Most of its wounds that were inflicted by magic had been healed, but it was still dazed because of the pain. The werewolf, who was staring at them with boundless hostility, suddenly moved. Not to rush them, but to run away. Ah, it's running away. At the same time as Lin shouted, Ludger chased the werewolf. He never had the slightest intention of losing the werewolf that he had found. Lin and Elendil hadn't noticed yet, but the werewolf's neck was also tied with a leash. It was fortunate that the leash was covered with its fur and could not be seen properly. However, if someone else found it afterwards, it would be difficult for him to destroy the evidence. Ludger stormed out from his spot with mana in his legs. As he chased the werewolf through the dark grass and crossed the garden, he could see the werewolf crawling up the roof on the outer wall of the nearby research building. Its sharp nails easily dug into the outer walls of the building, and its huge body soon reached the rooftop full of spires. I won't lose it. Ludger immediately used his wire launcher to soar vertically into the air and settled on the rooftop. Elendil and Lin, who were still watching the scene from afar, were amazed with their mouths wide open. Was that a floating magic? Maybe. Floating magic that could be implemented by the release of mana casting. They couldn't believe Ludger's ability to operate his mana, which he could use naturally while he was running. The two of them, who couldn't see the wire launcher because it was dark in the night, saw Ludger's entire movement as a part of his magic. The two silhouettes on the roof faced each other. Although it was not clearly visible because it was far away, it was not difficult to distinguish Ludger among the two by the size and approximate appearance. Ah, the full moon. The clouds in the sky were cleared, and soon a cold and tender silver lining poured down onto them like a curtain's hem. It was a full moon night. Ludger moved first as he was balancing himself on the rooftop of the spire-filled building. The werewolf also rushed toward Ludger. The two of them crossed each other, and a tight fight broke out. Whoa! Oh my gosh! Lin and Elendil watched Ludger's battle, forgetting that they had to leave. There was something about Ludger's fighting style that made it hard for them to take their eyes off of him. Under the moonlight, Ludger moved like a dancer and avoided the werewolf's attacks. The attacks made their skin shudder even though they were far away from the battle. Yet none of them touched Ludger's body, and his brilliant spells that were casted amidst the gap of the werewolf's attacks: fire, ice, wind. The elements of the spells were being shot like an arrow. The spells were second-tier magic, but they exactly hit the vital parts of the werewolf. They said he was in the army before he came here. Elendil recalled what she knew about Ludger jealousy. She wasn't particularly interested, but the maid who was taking care of her brought her his data to read just in case, so she had read everything to kill some time. At that time, she remembered that Ludger Chelisi had been in the army and had a military achievement while hunting for cryptids. The phrases that were written in his personal history, they were actually unfolding before her eyes. Elendil saw a wizard who fought for the first time. No, could she see that as a wizard fight? It was more controlled, neat, and meticulous. Rather than a wizard, his fighting style was more like that of a soldier, or perhaps more like a hunter who aimed for his goal accurately. Gaia the werewolf rolled on the roof while producing a violent sound and slipped on the slope. Ludger did not miss the chance. He was a predator who never missed the gap that was created by the wounded prey. His appearance when using magic to attack the werewolf seemed to be more similar to the wolf itself. Whoosh! The icy fangs that Ludger shot pierced the werewolf's chest. 3 fist-sized ice spears penetrated the werewolf's body in a row and impaled it on the rooftop. No matter how resilient the werewolf was, it was bound to die immediately from such a wound. The fight was over. Phew, I'm tired. Ludger realized that he had consumed a considerable amount of mana to deal with the werewolf. It's not good to use a lot of mana, though. He was glad to have been able to meet Hands and carry his medicine again. He would have been in big trouble if he hadn't done it. Originally, he wouldn't have to use magic in order to deal with that werewolf. There were many more certain ways than consuming mana uselessly. His deteriorating body condition also played a role in his mana consumption. If he had to point out a problem, it was that the place was Surin. There were some eyes watching him from time to time. A magic professor is bound to use magic in front of his students. First of all, he was a so-called Surin professor, so if he used the tools or methods that he often used in the days when he was a hunter and not magic there, they would be suspicious of him. I'll have to finish it quickly before it gets more bothersome. There was still another werewolf hiding in Surin. He was going to finish his duty to get rid of the werewolves that night. Gah! As Ludger slowly approached the werewolf, the stumbling werewolf suddenly raised its arm. There was still a long way for him to go to reach the werewolf, so even if it swung its arms, it wouldn't be able to reach him. What was that werewolf going to do? Ludger's question disappeared the moment he saw the debris of the building that was thrown by the werewolf. What? It was fortunate that he was on guard just in case. Ludger built barricades around his body by releasing his mana right away. The debris that flew like an arrow hit it and bounced off, but the problem was that the werewolf dragged some time for its next move. It immediately raised its hands and hit the rooftop floor hard. Crack! Due to the strong muscle strength of the werewolf, a part of the rooftop collapsed and its body fell down from there. Debris was spread, and a foggy cloud of dust soared around it. Ludger squinted at that sight. The werewolf is using its surroundings as a tool, no matter how artificial that non-cryptid creature was, since it was based on a wolf. Its instinct as an animal naturally preceded its action. Even if it was able to use its brain, it was mostly about distinguishing whether it could touch its opponent or not. But from the previous werewolf to that one in front of him, it is somehow doubtful to call them werewolves. Ludger also didn't expect the werewolf to run away as soon as it felt an emergency situation, but he never expected it to throw away the wreckage of the broken building in particular. Did I lose it? Ludger, who entered the building through the gaping hole, clicked his tongue when he realized that the werewolf itself had disappeared. However, he did not entirely lose it. There was still its subtle scent in the air that stimulated his nose. It's a good thing that I buried my scent in the middle of the fight, just in case. Ludger followed the scent left by the werewolf. His intention to finish all of it by the end of the day remained unchanged, because he wanted to live. Tessie, where are you? Aiden. We couldn't find her no matter how much we walked around. Wouldn't it be better to just give up? Aiden and Leo were searching hard for Tessie in places where people didn't visit. Last time, they had heard that Tessie had gone to the woods in the east. Then the two continued to look for Tessie even after the sunset. But there was no sign of Tessie's presence. Leo spoke first as he was slowly starting to get irritated. I'm sure Tessie must have backed off when she realized that she couldn't do it by herself. Don't you think that's the case if we can't find her, even in a place like this? But you never know. Even though it was Tessie who made the bet, it's our fault for not rejecting it properly. Leo looked sullen as he listened to Aiden's argument. He was obviously the one who thought that Tessie was bothersome as she kept clinging to them and had lied to her in order to kick her out. He felt a little bit guilty. That was also why they were walking around looking for Tessie. But we're also in danger if we get caught by the professors. Others will say it's only a penalty point, but it's also a big penalty for us since we also have to pay attention to our ranking. But we can't let her be. Do you really believe that Tessie is still looking for a werewolf? I don't usually believe that, but it's Tessie we're talking about. In fact, Aiden didn't know why he was so sure after saying it. But the look in Tessie's eyes when she asked him to fight with her again, and when she was just chattering on a usual occasion, the look in her eyes always seemed extremely desperate and obsessive, just like a person who wanted to achieve something. The thought that she might really be wandering around with her body messed up in order to catch a werewolf came to his mind. Phew, I get it. Let's check for just 30 more minutes, but if we don't find her by then, let's go back to the dormitory. Leo sighed as he looked at the boy beside him, who had a strong sense of justice. Even so, Leo couldn't stop him. He knew that his good-natured fellow, who approached him to be his friend at first, was someone who was so stubborn at crucial moments and not willing to make any compromises. It was the moment when the two people who had taken a little rest were about to move again. Kaya, there was a distant cry that belonged to a girl. The strangely familiar voice was obviously the voice of Tessie Fryad, whom the two had been desperately searching for. Leo? Yeah, I heard it. That way? The two ran through the grass and branches to the place where the scream came from. At that moment, the grass on the opposite side shook and someone popped out, and Aiden, who was running in the lead, collided with that someone. Aiden fell backwards as he was pinned underneath by something. Oh my, what's this all of a sudden? HNGG. Aiden raised his head as he felt something crushing his body when he fell backwards. The first thing he saw was a woman with red hair who had a strong presence, even with subtle moonlight shining upon her. Tessie? Aiden? Tessie raised her body immediately as she realized who the person she had underneath her in a cuddly position was. Why are you here? That's because I heard your scream. What? What do you mean a scream? I've never done that. Looking at Tessie, who blushed and shouted at Aiden, Leo sighed while saying, I was worried for no reason. Then they heard a shout of a beast, grrr. Oh, Aiden, did you hear that? Yeah. Is it really the werewolf of the rumor? The two men's wary gazes turned over to the bushes. Aiden and Leo both took out their wands. Then Tessie stood in front of the two. Both of you, hold on a second. Tessie, what are you doing? As Aiden asked her such a question, Tessie hesitated, unlike her usual self. She put her finger on her lips and motioned them to follow her. Aiden and Leo looked at each other because they wondered what was going on and eventually decided to follow Tessie's footsteps. The three of them, who moved quietly, soon reached the front of the basin where the ground was blown out. Look at that. As they looked in the direction that Tessie pointed in a quiet voice, they saw something wriggling in the center of the basin that was full of fallen leaves. That's... Aiden, a country boy with good night vision, immediately discovered what it was. Werewolf? It was obviously a werewolf. It was full of wounds everywhere and was gasping for air all the time, but it certainly was a werewolf. And it's a pup, though. The little werewolf was a pup that was not all grown up yet. Chapter 29, The Person Who Sees, The Person Who Solves, 1. Aiden and Leo only looked at each other. Werewolf, the one who turned Surin into a crucible of chaos, was right in front of them. But no matter how many times they looked at it, it was a pup. Even its grumbling voice made it clear that it was hurt somewhere. I came across it a little while ago. The reason why Tessie screamed, it was because she had suddenly found a werewolf while walking around without much thought. Tessie, who blushed because she was ashamed of the fact, soon acted arrogantly. So, I won the bet, right? You've only found it. Wasn't the bet for the one who captured it? Tessie immediately raged at Leo's remark. Is that so? Then I'll soon... Tessie, wait a second. Aiden pulled Tessie's nape as she was about to go down into the basin. What the hell are you doing? Ah, sorry, I didn't realize it. Aren't you being rude to a lady? That's not what's important right now. If it's not, then what? Tessie immediately sneered as she realized something. Ho ho. Aiden, are you being impatient because I found that werewolf? You pretended that you didn't, but you actually cared about losing to me. Tessie, didn't you feel anything strange? When a serious question was heard after her provocation, Tessie pouted her lips as if she had been disappointed. What? That's a werewolf's pup over there. Aside from whether it's possible for a werewolf to have a pup, the pup over there doesn't look well at all. I don't think it can move properly. Yeah, so why? But look, it's surrounded by fallen leaves. Besides these surroundings, it's a location that's far away from the public eye. I've never heard of a place like this in the forest, no matter how wide Surin is. Well, so what's wrong with that? Do you think that little werewolf settled here and collected the fallen leaves by itself? Tessie realized something and shut her mouth when he said that. In other words, Aiden was saying that the injured werewolf pup could not have gone all the way there alone. It meant there was something else that had helped the pup. Who in the world? I don't know who it is. Maybe there's probably another werewolf. Aiden kept his eyes on the werewolf while saying so, just in case it noticed their presence and suddenly rushed at them. Although it was a pup, it was bigger than a fairly large dog. The probability of danger could not be excluded. Oh. Aiden, who was carefully examining the werewolf, found something strange. Near the neck of a werewolf that was covered in fallen leaves and only just visible, he seemed to see something shining under the moonlight. When he looked at it while focusing his eyes, it turned out that he wasn't mistaken. Isn't that something like a leash? At that moment, Aiden judged that the werewolf did not just occur naturally. Aiden, what are you doing? It was the moment when Leo called him, as he felt that the look on Aiden's face was quite serious. Aiden glided down the basin, determined to do something. Aiden, hey. Leo was confused, and so was Tessie. The two rushed after Aiden. Aiden, who had come down to the center of the basin that was more than 5 meters away from his original spot, slowly approached the werewolf pup. Aiden, what are you doing? It's dangerous. There's something strange about it. Aiden wanted to confirm it with his own eyes. At that moment, the werewolf's pup, who was closing its eyes, stared at Aiden. Aiden paused as he tried to approach it cautiously. Their eyes were tangled in each other's gaze, and a breathtaking tension was lingering in the surroundings. Gulp. Aiden slowly held out his hand while swallowing his dry saliva. It's okay. I won't hurt you. He said so because he had seen the werewolf's eyes. There was no hostility or murderous intent. The transparent and clear eyes that were staring at him were full of innocence that seemed to belong to a country dog. A werewolf with such eyes attacked 2 people and sent them to a hospital room. Aiden didn't think so. Leo and Tessie couldn't think of stopping Aiden any longer. The pup, who was staring at him, immediately turned its head and closed its eyes again. Aiden breathed a sigh of relief inwardly and drew closer to the pup. As expected, it was docile. It even made a purring sound as though it was in a good mood when Aiden swept its fur with his hand. You hurt a lot, I see. Aiden said so and examined its wounds that were exposed outside of the fallen leaves. Didn't it get bitten by an animal? The traces on its body were not caused by an attack from other animals. Rather, it was more like a cut from something. When he looked at its neck while sweeping its hair with his hand, he could feel a hard and cold metal. As expected, he was not mistaken. I thought it was just a mere werewolf, but there's more to it. It was when Aiden thought that far, from the darkness, the sound of something approaching them quickly could be heard. Leo, who first noticed the strangeness of that sound, shouted, Aiden, run. As soon as Aiden heard the sound, he rushed in the opposite direction from which the sound was heard. Soon after, a huge shock hit his body. Arg. Aiden, who bounced more than 3 meters and rolled on the ground, shook away his dizziness and looked at the mysterious creature that had knocked him away. Werewolf. The thing that had hit him with its shoulder while running fast was an adult werewolf that was 5 times bigger than the werewolf pup. It glared at Aiden as if wanting to kill him while standing there protecting its pup. It's really a werewolf. Tessie trembled at such a sight and eventually raised her wand while charging mana with a determined look. The werewolf also stared at Tessie while thinking that she was about to do something. Hey, what are you doing? Leo tried to stop her, but Tessie didn't listen to him. There was a werewolf in front of her, the root of what had driven Surin into chaos. If only they didn't exist, and she got rid of them, she could revive her family. A fallen family. Her mother, who forced a smile at her while saying that it's okay. The trashy people who used to cling around her but turned their backs right away after her family had collapsed. She had to do it. Only she could raise the Fryad family back up. The werewolf in front of her was a certain stepping stone for it. Just because she hunted a werewolf did not mean it would revive her fallen family. Tessie was fully aware of it, but even a little recognition was fine. She could get an award point, collect a reward from the city of Leathervelk, or make her name known. She learned magic to do that, and she had gone to Surin to aim for success. The werewolf rushed at Tessie. It was fast. Tessie tried to cast a spell, but she made a mistake without realizing it due to the pressure of the werewolf that was rushing toward her. The spell. Her impatience had ruined her spell casting. The barely drawn mana was meaninglessly scattered. Beyond the appearance of the spell that disappeared like a ripped, wet paper, she could see a werewolf approaching her while showing its fangs. Ah, is this the end? As she thought so, Tessie felt someone suddenly push her to the side. The sharp claws that were wielded by the werewolf passed right in front of her through the air. Tessie, who rolled on the ground with someone, was stunned. Oh, Tessie, are you okay? AI, Dan. It was Aiden who had saved her from the crisis, the boy whom she kept bothering and asked for a match. If he was the slightest bit late in pushing her, Tessie would have lost her head. I'm glad you're safe. Why did you? I can't just watch my friend who's in danger. Friend. The word left Tessie speechless. Aiden looked at the werewolf, not caring about Tessie's reaction. There's something wrong with its movement. I think it's seriously hurt somewhere. Maybe that's why we were able to avoid its attack. As expected, there were 3 large holes that had yet to be healed in the werewolf's chest that was slightly exposed in the dark. Aiden gulped and opened his mouth. Sorry, it wasn't on purpose. We don't intend to do any harm to your pup. Aiden, what are you doing? There's no way a werewolf can communicate, Tessie shouted from behind, saying, What kind of stupid thing are you doing? But Aiden was serious. Aiden continued, staring at the werewolf in front of him with an unshakable gaze. Can you understand us? What's? Leo and Tessie looked puzzled. But the werewolf's reaction was strange. The werewolf, who was staring at them like it was going to kill them, calmed down and went back to its pup. Leo, who was watching such a scene, couldn't close his mouth. Does it really understand you? It just overreacted because it was afraid that its pup might be in danger. But, Aiden, it already attacked 2 students. It's calm now because of its baby, but we don't know when it'll suddenly show its true S. Leo's point was valid, but Aiden felt something indescribable. It was possible for Aiden to know because it was him who had faced the werewolf's pup the most closely. As soon as he had seen the pup's eyes, Aiden had clearly heard something. Please help me. Leo, Tessie, I know what I'm saying is far-fetched, but believe me just once. Aiden said so and slowly approached the werewolf. Grrrrrrr. The supposed mother threatened Aiden by showing her gums, but Aiden raised both of his hands and made a gesture that he was not dangerous. It's okay. I won't hurt you. As he narrowed the distance little by little with such determination, the werewolf glaring at Aiden also stopped showing its hostility. That was because the pup was in the worst condition. Use this. Aiden took a small medicine bottle out of his pocket that he usually carried around. It was a very basic recovery medicine that he had made when taking pharmacology classes in curses and dispelling. Since his skill was still insufficient, the potion's poor performance wouldn't show any great significance in healing, but at least it would help improve the condition of the pup, who was gasping for air. It was the moment when he tried to approach the werewolf with that thought. A white ray of light from somewhere penetrated the mother's body. Oh. Aiden, who was approaching the werewolf slowly, along with Leo and Tessie, who were watching the scene while holding their breaths from behind, were surprised and confused by the ray of light. It was a silver, shiny metal that penetrated the body of the werewolf mother. At first he thought it was a sharp spear, but eventually its shape collapsed and turned into a net that bound the mother werewolf's body. Is that a metal magic that uses? Who the hell does this? As soon as everyone was dumbfounded, a black shadow fell from the sky. You guys. What are you doing here? It was a man who they saw as a black shadow, and the man was someone whom they knew very well. Professor Ludger? Ludger, who overpowered the werewolf with a surprise attack, squinted his eyes as he didn't know there would be 3 students there. You all look familiar. Aiden, Leo, and Tessie Fried. What are the students who took my class doing here at this late hour? The 3 people whose names were called shuddered. They were doomed. They didn't expect to get caught by a professor in that situation. Their opponent was even Ludger Chelsea, who was famous for having no blood or tears. I'll hold the 3 of you responsible for this later. Back off for now. Tessie and Leo followed his order, but Aiden was different. He intervened between Ludger and the werewolf, blocking Ludger's way. Wait. Aiden, what the hell are you doing? Hearing Ludger's cold voice, Aiden trembled but did not back down. Professor Ludger, PL, please wait a minute. You told me to wait. There's something strange with that werewolf. No, I mean, to be exact, it seemed to understand people's words. Please reconsider killing that werewolf for a moment. Aiden spouted out what he had found out. Otherwise, Ludger would take the breath of that mother werewolf right away. It understands people, you said. What nonsense are you talking about? It's not nonsense. Maybe that werewolf. I told you to step back. Despite Ludger's threat, Aiden didn't step back. While staring at Aiden, Ludger found a baby werewolf licking its mother's face with its tongue over Aiden's shoulder. No ferocity at all. It just showed pure concern for its own family. The pup stood with its feet. It was the moment when the fallen leaves that covered its entire body were pushed out, and the rest of its body that was covered by the fallen leaves was shown. It saw Ludger. His eyebrows wriggled slightly. Oh. Aiden, who was staring at Ludger intensely, immediately noticed the subtle changes in him. What's wrong with Professor? Aiden was about to look back unconsciously. Whoosh! At that moment, his body flew through the air as if it had been pulled strongly by something. Aiden's body gently landed on the ground without any injury. It was a buffer effect that used wind magic. It was all done by Ludger. Professor? What he saw was Ludger's back, wearing a black frock coat. He couldn't see the werewolves that were hidden by Ludger's back. When Aiden was about to say something, Ludger casted his spell. WHRRRR. There was a flash of hot fire all of a sudden. It swallowed the 2 werewolves in a flash, scattering light everywhere. He could feel the heat even from a distance. It was obviously an attack spell that would kill the opponent. There were no screams from the werewolves that were swallowed by the fire. There was no time for them to scream, and they couldn't even feel the pain, as they had already disappeared into ashes. When the magic fire completely subsided, there was no trace left of the werewolves. There were only black ashes. Go back to the dormitory. Ludger said so without looking back. I will hold you responsible for your deviant behavior tomorrow. There was no emotion in his voice. Chapter 30. The person who sees, the person who solves too. Ludger stood still and stared at the place where the werewolves had been. His hands had burned them all down without a trace, along with all the evidence that they were a lab test and not just werewolves. It was okay for him to be relieved, since it was over now. But Ludger's mind was not the slightest bit at ease, until the other professors who lit up a fire with their magic from a distance arrived one by one. Ludger stood still, stuck on his spot. The werewolf case, which had caused a stir at Surin Academy, ended with the removal of werewolves by the new professor, Ludger Chelsea. Many students wondered if the incident was simply an inflated false rumor, but there were many witnesses who had actually witnessed the werewolves, so such an opinion was ruled out. Rumors had already spread among students that Ludger had a bloody fight with a werewolf on the roof of a building under the full moon. The students had already talked about the case on the Is it true that it was a real werewolf? I saw it in person. On the roof of the research building, the new professor fought with the werewolf, and it was so cool. It's not a lie, actually. A part of the roof of the 3rd research building was broken, and there were signs of a fight. Whoa. So the new professor really caught the werewolf. I heard the new professor is a former soldier. Then it's possible. He's awesome. So there were also questions about what the werewolves were and where they had appeared from. Some even argued that the werewolves might actually have been a secret experiment from somewhere. However, in the absence of clues, such an opinion was nothing more than gossip that did not even circulate properly. Because that wasn't the important thing. I got 5 penalty points because I got caught. Me too. This is a bit risky for my warning in this academy. Yeah. I don't care about my 5 penalty points, Tilda. I already got award points. Where do you live? That time, most of the students who decided to catch werewolves were found and faced penalties. Out of the entire school, there were 130 students who had been caught. Even the third-year students were included among them, so it was understandable. They went out to become heroes, but instead of solving the case, they only got penalty points, so most students tore their hair out of regret about their wrongdoings. It was the same for Aiden, Leo, and Tessie. Arg. We're doomed. We're really doomed. Why does it have to be Professor Ludger who caught us out of all people? The 3 of them had been called to the counseling room for a meeting with the principal. Aiden was still immersed in his thoughts, but Tessie was different. She was restless. She should never have allowed a loophole in order to revive her family. But in the werewolf incident, let alone being compensated, she was being properly punished by Ludger. Tessie glared at Aiden with resentment, and soon bit her lower lips and shook her head roughly. She couldn't blame Aiden. She wouldn't be alive without Aiden. Aiden was the one who saved her from the werewolf attack, after all. Yeah. I couldn't do anything at the time. She felt so stupid that she grabbed the hem of her uniform with her trembling hands. It had been about 10 minutes. The door to the counseling room opened. The 3 musketeers. Aiden, Leo, and Tessie, who were sitting in their seats, stood up on their feet. Principal. She was coming into the counseling room with a beaming smile. She had white on the outside part of her hair, but a pinkish on the inside part of her hair. Following the principal's footsteps was a man with a cold-hearted image. It was Ludger Chellisy, the man who blew down the werewolves the night before. Ludger looked the same as usual. His outfit was a red long coat, not his usual black frock coat, but his firm neatness still remained. Now, all 3 of you sit comfortably. Hearing the principal's words, the 3 people, including Aiden, sat down again while studying the principal's face. The principal also sat in her empty upper seat. Please sit down as well, Professor Ludger. I'll stand here. Well then, if that's convenient for you, now let's get down to business. Do you know why I called the 3 of you here? No one answered that question right away. But there was no one who didn't know. There was only one reason why the 3 of them were gathered there, because they had witnessed the werewolves from the closest distance and gotten caught by Ludger. Tessie, who didn't expect to face the principal, thought Ludger had really been determined to punish her. What does he mean by not just giving penalty points, but also telling the principal about it? Wasn't it a declaration that it would never be finished with ordinary disciplinary action? I'm doomed. She held back her tears for dear life. It was some kind of a bad feeling. After that day, she never forgot that she had promised herself never to cry again. Most of all, she was triggered by Aiden and Leo, who were sitting casually. What will happen to us? Aiden opened his mouth first, but as Aiden spoke, his gaze did not avert from Ludger. Why do you think I called all of you? I don't think you wanted to give us a mere penalty point. You're right. It was then that Ludger opened his mouth. The 3 of you ignored Surin's warning and went all the way into the forest and posed a danger to yourselves, and you almost got hurt. If things had gone even a little wrong, one of you could have died. The 3 people who felt as if they were stabbed by his remark shut their mouths. Even though there wasn't an accident in which anyone died in the end, I thought you should know for sure how serious your complacent behavior was. That's why I offered the principal a suggestion. They realized it was serious. All 3 of them knew that those words didn't have good intentions behind them. As the heavy atmosphere lingered in the counseling room, the principal clapped her hands. Now, don't make faces like the world is collapsing. Think positively. And Professor Ludger, your words that frightened the students were a bit harsh. Your Honor, this is not something that should be overlooked. Of course, thanks to Professor Ludger's hard work, it ended without anyone getting hurt, and you are right that the students were complacent. But it ended well, didn't it? I don't understand. Because they're still kids, and even with the intimidating remarks, Professor Ludger gave quite a detailed explanation, right, Aiden? Yes, yes. When he was suddenly called, Aiden answered in a hurry. I heard the story. I heard you jump to save Tessie from danger. And no. It's just... Competition among students is important, but it's better to help each other instead. And neither of you ran away from the location so that you could protect Aiden. At the words of appraisal coming out of the principal's mouth one by one, confusion lingered on the faces of Aiden, Leo, and Tessie. Why is the principal like that? You're absolutely wrong in your behavior. That's why I decided to take Professor Ludger's advice and give each of you 10 penalty points. 10 penalty points. If it was 10 and not 5 points, it meant that it was twice as bad compared to other students. It was obvious that it was disadvantageous towards them. But, at that moment, the principal's clear voice awakened the three people from their thoughts. Your actions in the moment of crisis are certainly worthy of praise, so I'll give all three of you 10 award points. Pardon? Is that true? 10 penalty points. However, in addition to that, the penalty points had practically disappeared due to 10 award points. The principal's words did not end there. Aiden, you showed your courage in thinking of your colleagues before your own body in a time of crisis. I'll give you 10 extra award points. Oh, Leo, you didn't forget to be cool-headed in a moment of urgency, and you deliberately left a trail on the path as you passed so that others could follow you. How come? I'll give you 10 extra award points, and Tessie Fried. Yes, you had the courage to face the werewolf and fight without running away. Some might say it's reckless bravado, but you've understood it well. I hope you will keep that unshakable heart forever. Yes. Understood. Because of that, I'll give you 10 award points. As a result, the three of them had received 10 additional award points rather than penalty points. The principal, who had been smiling at the three people who still couldn't accept that this was real, looked back at Ludger while sitting down. You don't have any complaints, right, Professor Ludger? If that's what your honor wants. Ludger stepped back and drew the line that there was no disagreement. The principal clapped her hands. Congratulations, kids. Keep up the good work in the future. Oh, yes, thank you, Your Honor. But still, don't overdo it. Now we have already taken too much time. Everyone, hurry up and go back to the dormitory. The three students left the counseling room while thinking that they were still dreaming. Aiden, who was leaving last, stopped and looked back at Ludger, who didn't even glance at him. What was the reaction that Professor Ludger had shown just then? Aiden left the counseling room with unresolved questions. The door closed, and only Ludger and the principal were left in the counseling room. Phew, Professor Ludger, are you satisfied now? The principal said so after the students were completely out of their sight. I was surprised. Even though it was you who asked me to take good care of those children. The principal, who was shaking both of her legs with her head leaned back, glanced at Ludger with half-opened eyes. On top of that, you're asking me to act as if I was the one who did all of it. Because it wouldn't carve a very good image of you if you did what I was doing there. I know, you want us to play a good cop and a bad cop, right? I can't believe you call yourself a villain. Aren't you feeling sad about it? I just chose the most efficient method. Oh, is that so? Well, since you said you're fine with that, I won't bother longer about that because, in the end, it was a good thing for the students. The president, standing up from her seat, approached the window that showed Surin's scenery and swept the transparent window with her slender fingertips. Professor Ludger, you said you took care of the werewolves yourself, didn't you? Yes. What did you see there? What do you mean? Wasn't there something peculiar about the werewolves? Even with the principal's sharp words, Ludger's expression did not change. I didn't think there was anything. Is that so? Yes. I just chased the werewolves and I got rid of them because I was afraid that they would pose a threat to the students, just like what I did in the military. Well, then it can't be helped. The principal also did not question him any further because Ludger's fight with the werewolves while protecting students was already so famous that it had spread throughout the school. Anyway, I'd like to thank you once again. Thanks to you, nobody died. I just did my job. I like that confident attitude. I'll look forward to your good performance in the future. Ludger bowed his head without a word. After his conversation with the principal, Ludger returned to his professor's office. Ludger, who was sitting while leaning on the back of his chair, recalled what had happened the night before, what had surprised him. The body of the werewolf pup that had been hidden by the fallen leaves that no one else had ever discovered. It had certainly belonged to a human child on which fur had not yet grown. Right, he wasn't mistaken. It was obviously a human body that had not yet turned into a wolf. The Shamses school did not use wolves as experiments to create werewolves. Rather, it was the opposite. They created a werewolf using human beings as an experiment. Instead of substituting human genes into wolves, they had captured human beings and forcibly mixed beast factors into them. The strange behavior of the werewolf who had thrown the wreckage with her hands when she was in an emergency was finally understandable. He had wondered why their brains worked so well. They were not like beasts, who should have no reasoning. The werewolf pup must have been a human child. It must have been the mother who blocked his way to protect her child. Was it, her family, the three werewolves who had made a mess in Leathervelk and Surin? Was it a human family that had been used as an experiment? A child and two parents. Ordinary people who were just being swept away by unfortunate incidents. Ludger had killed the three of them with his own hands. Silently, Ludger tightened his fist. I have no regrets in my actions. Even if he went back to that time, Ludger would have made the same judgment. Otherwise, it would have been him who was in danger. All of the experiments had to be eliminated, and the connection he was involved in had to be broken as well. There was no other way, and there was already a death toll from the werewolves. Even though they had no choice but to do that in order to live, they had still killed and eaten someone's family. That was why he had killed them. Yes, he's sure that was enough. The eyes. The baby's clear eyes as it looked back at him at the end after licking its mother. While Ludger was casting his spell to kill them, the look in the pup's eyes did not contain any rebuke or anger toward Ludger. There was only one emotion. The pup had been thankful to him for ending their terrible lives. Ludger got up from his seat. For more chapters, join my Patreon, link in description.